Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto get married with 50 girl and become the king of harem? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Sage's Burden. The air in Konoha, 6 months after the war, was the sound of hammers. Not the rhythmic, hopeful clang of new construction, but the stuttering, hesitant taps of repair. It was a city breathing through broken ribs. Scaffolding clung to the sides of buildings like ill-fitting bandages, and the wind, once buffered by the dense sprawl of the village, now whistled through skeletal frames and empty lots. Carrying the scent of cut lumber and damp earth, Naruto Uzumaki stood before the memorial stone, its polished black surface a stark wound against the muted greens and browns of the training grounds. The sheer number of new names carved into its face was obscene. They were etched in sharp, precise lines of pristine white, too fresh, too clean. They hadn't yet had the decency to weather and fade. He traced a finger over one, not feeling the stone but the memory of a cocky grin and a bark of laughter. Kiba. No, Kiba was alive. He was just different now. Quieter. The name his finger had found was from another squad. A kid who had idolized him. Naruto couldn't remember his face clearly, only the earnest, wide eyes. The weight of it all pressed down on him. Not the sudden, crushing impact of a battle, but the slow, grinding pressure of the aftermath. He was the hero, the savior. Children waved at him in the streets, shopkeepers refused his money, and dignitaries from foreign lands bowed to him. He had the world's acknowledgement, the very thing he had screamed for his entire life. It tasted like ash. They're going to wear a groove in that stone if you keep staring at it. Shikama. Runara's voice was a low drawl from behind him, lazy as always, but the shadows under his eyes told a different story. He looked 10 years older than he was, the mantle of chief strategist a physical burden on his slumped shoulders. Just paying my respects, Naruto said, not turning. You've been paying them for 2 hours, Shikamaru countered, stepping up beside him. He didn't look at the stone. He never did. Kakashi-sensei sent me. The summit is starting. Naruto sighed, a plume of white vapor in the crisp morning air. Another one. Didn't we just solve the land of hot water's rice dispute? This isn't about rice, Shikamaru said, his voice losing its customary laziness. It held a clipped, serious edge that made Naruto finally turn to look at him. This is about everything. The Kage are all here. Gaara, Kuretsuchi, Darui, Chojuro. It's the full assembly. Naruto's brow furrowed. The full assembly hadn't met since the war's conclusion. What is it? Shikamaru's gaze was distant, fixed on the half-rebuilt Hokage tower. A solution. They think they've found one. It's permanent, and a real drag. He started walking, not waiting for a reply. That was all the confirmation Naruto needed. This was bad. Shikamaru only used that tone when a plan was logically sound and morally reprehensible. The Hokage Tower's council chamber was stifling. It was a room designed for arguments, its thick walls meant to contain shouting matches and fragile secrets. Today, it contained a silence more deafening than any argument. The 5 Kage sat at the curved table, each a portrait of their nation's post-war exhaustion. Gaara, the Kage, was as still as a desert statue, his hands clasped before him, his eyes holding the ancient weariness of the sands. Darui, the Raikage, leaned back, his posture feigning relaxation. But his fingers drummed a restless, agitated rhythm on the table. Kuretsuchi, the Tsuchikage, sharp and impatient, looked as if she were seconds away from melting the entire table out of sheer frustration. Chojuro, the Mizukage, seemed to shrink in his chair, his polite nervousness a thin veneer over a core of steely resolve. Kakashi, sitting at the head as Hokage, gestured for Naruto to take the seat beside him. Naruto, thank you for coming. Shikamaru said it was important, Naruto said, his eyes scanning the room. The tension was a physical thing, a pressure against his skin. This wasn't a meeting of allies. It was a gathering of survivors bracing for the next catastrophe. Gaara was the first to speak, his voice a dry rasp, like sand scouring stone. Naruto, we are grateful for your presence. We have spent the last month in quiet correspondence, analyzing the state of our nations. The conclusion is grim. The peace is a lie, Kuretsuchi cut in, her voice sharp as flint. It's a ceasefire. And it's fraying. My miners in the land of Earth are skirmishing with Suna patrols over resource veins we haven't fought over in 100 years. The land of lightning is accusing Kiri of piracy. The smaller nations are starving, and the daimyo are hoarding food and materials for their own courts, bleeding the villages dry. Darui grunted in affirmation. Goodwill bought with all that blood is running out. We're one bad harvest, one border dispute away from another war. And none of us, he said, his gaze sweeping the room, can survive another war. Naruto felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He'd seen the reports. He'd felt the simmering anger in the streets, the fear behind the polite smiles. So we enforce the treaty. We strengthen the shinobi alliance. Words on paper, Gaara said, shaking his head slowly. Treaties have failed for centuries. Alliances crumble. They are built on trust, and trust is the first casualty of hardship. Then what's the answer? Naruto demanded, his voice rising. What's this permanent solution? Shikamaru mentioned. The room fell silent again. Kakashi looked down at his hands. It was Kuretsuchi who finally looked him dead in the eye, her expression stripped of all emotion, leaving only cold, hard pragmatism. A treaty of flesh and blood, the Tsuchikage stated. A bond that cannot be broken by politics or famine. We propose a new pact. The Union of Clans. Naruto waited. The name meant nothing to him. Gaara elaborated, his voice steady. We will bind all the major clans and villages together through a single, undeniable point of connection. A human linchpin. A living treaty that embodies the strength and unity of all our nations. Naruto stared at them, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying, sickening dread. He felt the blood drain from his face. You don't mean. We do, Kakashi said, his voice heavy with a reluctance that offered no comfort. The strength of a nation lies in its clans. The Hyuga, the Nara, the Akamichi, the Chinook, the Yuki, the Kagaya remnants. Every village, every bloodline with power and influence. To bind them, to stop them from ever turning on one another again. The pact requires a marital alliance. The word hung in the air, grotesque and obscene. A what? Naruto whispered, though the word came out as a choked laugh of disbelief. Kuretsuchi leaned forward, her eyes boring into him. Don't be dense, Uzumaki. This isn't about romance. This is the most important political arrangement in the history of the world. Each of the 50 most powerful and influential clans across the 5 great nations and the smaller countries will offer a daughter, a sister, or an heir. They will be bound in marriage. She didn't need to finish. Naruto was already on his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. The temperature in the room spiked as his chakra flared, a wave of raw, incandescent fury. To me, he roared, the sound echoing off the stone walls. Are you insane? All of you. Naruto. Calm down, Kakashi said, his hand raised. Calm down. Naruto's voice was incredulous. You want to marry me off to 50 women like I'm some kind of breeding stock. To seal a political deal. People aren't tools. Marriage isn't a weapon. Sit down, Uzumaki, Darui said, his voice a low rumble of thunder. There was no heat in it, only a profound weariness. This isn't a request, it is a demand from a coalition of nations on the brink of collapse. Your power, your heritage as an Uzumaki and the Jinchuriki of all 9-tailed beasts. Your status as the undisputed savior of the world. You are the only one who stands above clan politics. The only one everyone trusts not to abuse such a connection. It's not about trust, it's about control. Naruto shot back. This makes me a king. I never wanted to be a king. We don't care what you want. Kuretsuchi snapped, slamming her palm on the table. A web of cracks spread from the impact. I want my shinobi to stop coming home in coffins because of some squabble over a damned iron mine. Gaara wants to feed his people without begging the fire daimyo for grain. This world is dying, Naruto. Your feelings are a luxury we can no longer afford. Naruto's gaze whipped from face to face. He saw no malice, no greed. He saw only desperation. These were good people, his friends and allies. Backed into a corner and willing to do something terrible to save everyone. And that was so much worse. He looked at Kakashi, a desperate appeal in his eyes. Sensei. You can't agree with this. Kakashi's visible eye closed for a long moment. When it opened, it was filled with the same bleak resignation as the others. The Fire Daimyo and the other feudal lords are already maneuvering to reclaim the power they lost during the war. They see the Shinobi Alliance as a threat to their authority. They would rather see us weakened and fighting amongst ourselves. This union, it would create a new power structure. One centered on the villages, not the courts. It would give us the political strength to stand against them, to build a world for ourselves. He paused, the next words seeming to cost him dearly. It is the most logical path to a lasting peace. Naruto felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. He stumbled back, shaking his head. No, I won't do it. Find another way. He turned and stormed out of the chamber, the oppressive silence closing in behind him. He didn't know where he was going, only that he needed to get away. The corridors of the tower felt like a cage. The polite nods from Shunin and Jonin felt like the stares of his keepers. He burst out into the open air of the tower's balcony, gulping in the cold air, his heart hammering against his ribs. His dream had been so simple. Become Hokage. Protect his friends. Be acknowledged. He'd done it. He had saved the world. And his reward was to be shackled to it, to become a symbol, a political tool, a husband to 50 strangers. The simple life he craved. A quiet apartment, ramen with Iruka-sensei, sparring with Lee, maybe, just maybe, holding Hinata's hand without the world watching, felt like it was dissolving into an impossible fantasy. He didn't know how long he stood there, watching the scarred village try to heal itself. The sound of a single, soft footstep behind him didn't startle him. He knew that chakra signature anywhere. I don't want to talk about it, Kakashi-sensei. I'm not here as your teacher, Kakashi said, his voice quiet. He leaned against the railing beside Naruto. I'm here as the Hokage. And the Hokage has to tell you that the first delegates are already on their way. Tamari from Suna, Kuritsuchi is, of course, already here. A contingent from the Yuki clan remnants in the Land of Water. This is already in motion, Naruto. The clans have agreed. They see it as the only way. They agreed to sell their daughters, Naruto spat, the words tasting foul. They agreed to invest their futures in a single, unified house, Kakashi corrected gently. They see it as an honor. To be bound to the lineage of the Sage of Six Paths. They believe it will grant their bloodlines security for 1,000 years. And the women, did they get a say? As much of a say as any clan heir has ever had in their marriage, Kakashi admitted, and the honesty of it was a slap in the face. This is a world of duty, Naruto. You know that better than anyone. Naruto fell silent, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a profound, hollow emptiness. He had carried the hatred of the village as a child, the fate of the world as a teenager. He had thought, foolishly, that once the fighting was done, the burden would lift. He was wrong. It had just changed shape. What do you want me to do? Naruto asked, his voice barely a whisper. What do you really want me to do, Kakashi? Kakashi was quiet for a long time. As your former teacher, who sees you as a son, I want you to tell them all to go to hell. I want you to run away with your friends and live a life you choose. He sighed, the sound impossibly heavy. But as the Hokage, I need you to save us all. Again, he placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. A rare gesture of genuine affection. The choice is yours. It always has been. No one can force you. But you need to understand the consequences if you refuse. The alliance will shatter. The cage will see it as a rejection from Konoha. The world will burn. And all those names on that stone, they will have died for nothing more than a few months of quiet. Kakashi squeezed his shoulder, then left him alone with the impossible choice. The Hyuga compound was an island of serene tradition in the sea of Konoha's chaotic reconstruction. Its white walls were immaculate, its gardens perfectly manicured. It was a place of order, of rules, of destiny decided by birth. Naruto had never felt more like an intruder. He walked the sterile paths, the crunch of gravel under his sandals unnaturally loud. He was here to see Hinata. The thought of the conversation to come made him physically ill. Of all the 50 faceless names, hers was the one that mattered. Hers was the one that felt like a true betrayal. He found her in the main dojo, practicing her forms. She moved with a liquid grace that was both beautiful and deadly, her palms striking the air, leaving invisible ripples of force. She was no longer the painfully shy girl who fainted in his presence. The war had forged her, too. There was a quiet confidence in her posture, a focus in her pale lavender eyes that was unshakable. She finished her kata, her body still, her breathing controlled. She didn't seem surprised to see him. "Naruto-kun," she said, her voice soft but steady. She bowed her head slightly. "The elders informed me of the summit's decision." Of course they did. The Hyuga were masters of information. The news would have reached them before Naruto had even left the council chamber. The cold formality of it made his heart ache. "Hinata, he started, but the words caught in his throat. What could he possibly say? "I'm sorry they're forcing me to marry you and 49 other women." She saved him from having to try. "It is a great honor for the Hyuga clan," she said, reciting the words as if she had practiced them. Her eyes were fixed on a spot just past his shoulder. "To be so central to the foundation of the new piece is our solemn duty." Duty. Naruto stepped closer, his voice pleading. "Hinata, this isn't about duty. It's wrong. You know it's wrong." Finally, she met his gaze, and he saw it. The flicker of pain behind the placid mask of the clan heir. A deep, profound hurt that she was trying so desperately to contain. "What is right?" she asked, her voice trembling almost imperceptibly. "Is it right to allow the world to tear itself apart again? Is it right to let my cousin's sacrifice be in vain?" The mention of Neji was a physical blow. Naruto flinched. He remembered that day with searing clarity. The splintering wood, the look of peaceful acceptance on Neji's face, his final words. "Because you called me a genius, your life is not your own anymore. He died to protect you," Hinata continued, her voice gaining a fragile strength. "To protect us. He died for a future where we could live in peace. If this alliance is the price of that future, then it is a price I must be willing to pay. It is the duty of the main house." She was using her duty as a shield, hiding her own heart behind the immense weight of her family's expectations. He saw the sacrifice she was making, not just for the world, but for him. She was validating the council's decision, making it easier for him to accept, and it was tearing her apart. "What about what you want?" Naruto asked, his voice raw. "What about what we might have wanted?" A single tear escaped her control, tracing a glistening path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "What I want is not important. Not anymore." He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before he gently cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away the tear. Her skin was soft, and she trembled at his touch, leaning into it for just a second. In that fleeting moment, he saw the girl she was, the one who had always believed in him, the one who had confessed her love for him in the face of absolute despair. He was about to sacrifice that, too. All of it. Neji's words echoed in his head. Your life is not your own anymore. He had never understood them more clearly than he did right now. His life belonged to the world that he had saved. It belonged to the memories of the fallen. It belonged to the hope in the eyes of the living. He looked at Hinata, this strong, noble woman who was willing to place the entire world before her own heart. How could he do any less? He slowly pulled his hand back. The warmth lingered on his skin for a moment before the cold air washed it away. "Thank you, Hinata," he said softly. It was all he could manage. Naruto sat on the carved head of the fourth Hokage, his legs dangling over the edge. The village spread out below him, a tapestry of light and shadow under the setting sun. From up here, the damage was less visible. It looked whole. It looked peaceful. A beautiful lie. "They're not wrong, Kit." Kurama's voice rumbled in the back of his mind, a deep, ancient bass. The fox had been quiet throughout the day, observing, listening. Your species is self-destructive and short-sighted. They forget pain too quickly. A treaty written in blood is far more binding than one written in ink. These old fools, they've stumbled upon a wisdom they don't even understand. It's barbaric, Naruto thought back, pulling his knees to his chest. It's practical, Kurama countered. You will be the nexus. The heart of a new global clan. Your children will carry the blood of every major bloodline. In 2 generations, to declare war on another village would be to declare war on your own cousins. It's a brutal, but effective, path to integration. And me, my life, Your life stopped being your own the day you decided to become this world's pillar, the fox grumbled. You wanted the hat, the responsibility. Well, this is it. It's just bigger and messier than you imagined. Naruto knew the fox was right. Kakashi was right. Hinata was right. They were all right. His feelings were a luxury. His dream of a simple life was a childish fantasy. He had a duty. To Neji. To Jiraiya. To his father and mother. To everyone who had bet their lives on him. He closed his eyes, drawing the natural energy of the world into himself. He needed to center himself, to find the calm determination that had carried him through the war. Sage mode settled over him, the world coming alive in a symphony of sensation. He could feel the life energy of every person in the village, the slow, deep pulse of the earth beneath him, the whisper of the wind. He expanded his senses further, reaching out, feeling the shape of the continent. The flow of chakra across the great network of life. And then he felt it. It was at the very edge of his perception. A place beyond the world. A chilling, terrifying anomaly. It wasn't a presence, but an absence. A patch of absolute nothing in the vibrant tapestry of natural energy. It was a hole in the universe. It did not radiate malice or power, it radiated silence. A deep, profound, hungry silence that seemed to drink the energy around it, leaving a cold, dead void in its wake. It was fundamentally wrong. It was an anti-life, an anti-chakra. It was the universe holding its breath. Naruto's eyes snapped open, the orange pigmentation of sage mode fading. His heart was pounding. What was that? It felt ancient, primordial, and utterly alien. It was a threat of a kind he had never conceived of. A shadow lurking just beyond the horizon. A threat the bickering, fractured nations of the world would be utterly unprepared for. In that moment, everything became clear. The cage's plan wasn't just a political solution. It was a necessity. The world needed to be united. Not just to stop them from killing each other, but to prepare them for what might be coming. They needed to be a fortress. A single, unified weapon. He was the only one who could do it. He was the linchpin, the living treaty, the king. He hated it, but he would do it. He leapt from the monument, landing softly in the shadows of the street below. He walked back to the Hokage Tower, his steps now firm, his purpose set. The doubt and anger were gone, replaced by a grim, cold resolve. He entered the council chamber without knocking. The cage were all still there, the untouched cups of tea before them now cold. They looked up as he entered, their faces etched with anxiety. Naruto walked to the center of the room, his presence filling the space. He was no longer the angry young man who had stormed out hours ago. He was the hero of the Fourth Great Ninja War, and he wore the authority of that title like a cloak. He met the gaze of each cage. One by one. "I'll do it," he said, his voice clear and steady, leaving no room for argument. "I accept the terms of the union." A collective sigh of relief went through the room. Kuretsuchi even managed a small, tight smile. "But," Naruto continued, his voice hardening, "on my terms." The cage stiffened. "These women are not hostages. They are not property to be traded. They will live in Konoha as respected members of this village. They will have a voice. They will be my partners, not my possessions." He looked directly at Kakashi. "We will build a new compound, a neutral ground. The Uzumaki compound. It will be a home, not a political prison. They will answer to me, and I will answer to this council. We build this new world together, as equals. Or we don't build it at all." There was a moment of stunned silence before Gaara gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Your terms are acceptable. They are honorable." One by one, the others agreed. Naruto gave a curt nod. "Good. Then let them come." He turned and walked out, leaving the leaders of the world to work out the details. He had a world to unite, and a strange, silent darkness to prepare for. The burden was his. He would carry it. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A Fortress of Vows. The great gates of Konoha, recently rebuilt with sturdy, dark timber and reinforced with the strongest ceiling arrays the Uzumaki clan archives had to offer, stood as a symbol of the village's resilience. Today, they felt less like a gateway and more like the teeth of a gilded cage. Naruto stood just inside the threshold, flanked by Kakashi and Shikamaru. The formal robes of the occasion feeling stiff and foreign on his shoulders. The crisp autumn air did little to cool the anxious sweat on his brow. He was waiting for his future to arrive. All of it. The first delegation was from Suna, a line of figures marching out of the heat shimmer of the road, their robes the color of desert sand. At their head was a woman Naruto knew well, a person who embodied the harsh, unyielding beauty of her homeland. Temari. Her teal eyes were as sharp and assessing as ever, sweeping over the Konoha reception, the rebuilt walls, and finally, Naruto himself. There was no warmth in her gaze, only the cool calculation of a seasoned diplomat and warrior. She held her great iron fan strapped to her back, not as an accessory, but as a promise. "Lord Hokage," she said, her voice a dry rustle as she offered a crisp, formal bow to Kakashi. Kage-sama sends his greetings and his assurances of Suna's commitment to this union. The slight hesitation before the word union loaded it with a dozen unspoken reservations. She then turned to Naruto. She didn't bow, she simply inclined her head, a gesture of acknowledgement between equals, or perhaps, rivals. "Uzumaki. It seems our villages will be more closely tied than I ever imagined." "Temari," Naruto replied, managing a nod. "Welcome to Konoha. We hope your journey was tolerable." A flicker of something, amusement, perhaps, crossed her lips. "It was a walk through a desert. It is never tolerable. One simply endures it." Before he could respond, she was already moving past him, her gaze locking with Shikamaru's. A silent conversation passed between them, a decade of shared history, rivalry, and begrudging respect packed into a single glance. It was a brief moment of familiarity in a sea of suffocating protocol. The next arrival was from Iwagakure. Their procession was blunt and imposing, their steps heavy on the Konoha soil. Kuretsuchi strode at their front, her short black hair and the confident, almost arrogant swing of her shoulders a stark contrast to Temari's reserved regality. She stopped directly in front of Naruto, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of defiance and curiosity. "So," she began, her voice laced with a gravelly sarcasm, "this is the man who's supposed to be the pillar of the world. You're shorter than I expected." Naruto felt a muscle in his jaw twitch. "And you're exactly as charming as I remember, Tsuchikage." Kuretsuchi let out a short, sharp laugh. "Good. Charm is a tool for merchants and the fire daimyo. We in Iowa prefer rock. And rock doesn't need to be charming." She looked him up and down, a geologist examining a strange new mineral. "My grandfather, the old fossil, believed you were the key to everything. You had a will of stone that couldn't be broken. I'm here to see if he was right." Her words were a challenge, a test. She wasn't just accepting this pact, she was here to personally vet its foundation. Hot on Iwa's heels came the delegation from Kumo, their white and gold robes a stark contrast to the earthy tones of the others. Their representative was Karui, the fiery red-haired kunoichi Naruto had encountered years ago. Her face was set in a permanent scowl, her hand resting on the hilt of her longsword. She bowed stiffly to Kakashi, then fixed Naruto with a smoldering glare. "On behalf of the Raikage," she said, her voice clipped and formal, "Kumogakure offers its strength to this union. We expect Konoha's commitment to be as absolute." It sounded less like a pledge and more like a threat. "Konoha has always been committed to peace," Naruto replied evenly, refusing to be baited. "Funny," Karui retorted, her eyes narrowing. "My history books are filled with times Konoha's commitment to peace involved a lot of dead Kumo ninja." Before the tension could escalate, Kakashi stepped forward, his single visible eye curving into a placating smile. "History has been unkind to all of us, Karui Dono. We are here today to write a new chapter. Please, allow us to escort you to your accommodations." More arrived. A quiet, watchful kunoichi with pale blue hair from a collateral branch of the Yuki clan in Kurigakure. Her presence a silent testament to the bloody civil wars her village was trying to leave behind. A stoic woman from a minor samurai clan in the Land of Iron, her chakra so tightly controlled it was almost non-existent. Two sisters from a clan of herbalists in the Land of Hot Water, their expressions nervous and out of place among the hardened warriors. The sheer diversity was overwhelming. They were a collection of puzzle pieces from a dozen different boxes, and he was the table they were all being forced to fit on. He watched them all being led away, a procession of futures being marched into his own. He was a king inspecting his new territories, a general reviewing his troops. He was anything and everything but a man about to meet his brides. The Tempo, Rary residence for the delegations, was a sprawling, newly constructed guest house on the outskirts of the village, a place of clean wood, paper screens, and simmering hostility. The women were quartered in a large, communal hall, a deliberate choice by the council to encourage interaction. It was having the opposite effect. The hall was a map of political divides. The Suna and Konoha women, including Hinata who had arrived earlier, occupied one side, their conversation muted and polite. The Iwa and Kumo contingents had claimed opposite corners, glaring at each other across the polished floorboards like rival predators. The smaller clans huddled in the middle, trying to remain invisible. Temari sat, perfectly poised, sipping a cup of tea that a nervous Konoha attendant had brought her. Her eyes, however, were not on her cup. They were scanning the room, noting the power dynamics, the subtle alliances, the weaknesses. "You're quiet, Hyuga," she said, her voice cutting through the silence on their side of the room. Hinata, who had been observing the tense standoff, started slightly. "I was just observing, Temari-san." A Hyuga talent, Temari noted, a hint of respect in her tone. "What do you see?" Hinata's pale eyes drifted towards the Kumo corner, where Karui was loudly sharpening her sword, the metallic rasp setting everyone's teeth on edge. "I see a great deal of pride and fear hiding behind it. They all fear this union will diminish them, make them subservient to Konoha." Temari gave a slight nod. "And the Iwa woman, Kuretsuchi. She watches Uzumaki's every move when she thinks no one is looking. She's not just observing, she's measuring, judging." "Naruto-kun can withstand any judgment," Hinata said, a soft but unshakable conviction in her voice. Temari's gaze settled on Hinata, a new intensity in her eyes. "Your devotion is admirable. Let's hope it's not misplaced. This isn't one of his fights where he can win by shouting about friendship and hitting something with a bigger Rasengan. Politics is a different kind of war. The blades are quieter, but they cut just as deep." Across the room, Kuretsuchi scoffed, loud enough to be heard. "Listen to the Suna princess play strategist. You're all acting like this is some kind of permanent arrangement. This is a stopgap, a temporary shield. The moment it's no longer convenient, these vows will break." Karui stopped sharpening her blade, its edge now gleaming under the lamplight. "For once, the Iwa ninja is right. Kumo makes no vow that it cannot keep. But we will not be leashed by this fantasy. If Konoha shows any sign of favoritism, if our sovereignty is threatened, this fortress of vows will come tumbling down." The air crackled, heavy with the promise of violence. This was what the world feared. A single spark, and the whole fragile structure would ignite. The women in this room were not just individuals, they were living embodiments of their nation's ancient grudges and fierce pride. Then, the doors to the hall slid open. Naruto stood there, having shed his formal robes for his more familiar black and orange Jonin attire. He looked at the scene before him, the clear battle lines drawn in a room meant to foster unity. He didn't look angry or disappointed. He just looked tired. "I'm told dinner is ready," he said, his voice calm and even, cutting through the tension. "But I imagine none of you are very hungry." He walked into the center of the room, into the no man's land between the factions. "Kuretsuchi, you think this is a temporary shield. You're right, shields are meant to be used, not just polished and displayed." He turned to Karui. "You're worried about being leashed. Good. A partnership of the unwilling is just slavery. Kumo's strength is its independence. This union is meant to protect that, not destroy it." He then looked at Temari. "And you're right, this isn't a battle I can win with a Rasengan. That's why I need you. All of you." He let his gaze travel across every face in the room, from the most powerful to the most timid. "I didn't ask for this. I'm guessing most of you didn't either. We've been handed an impossible task, to stitch a world back together when it's still trying to bleed. I can't do it alone. Konoha can't do it alone." He took a deep breath. "The ceremony is in an hour. It's a formality, a public show. The real work starts after. The work of building something real out of this arrangement. I'm not asking for your trust. I know I have to earn it. All I'm asking for now is a truce. In this room, for one night, we can go back to being enemies tomorrow." Silence answered him. He stood there, alone in the center of the room, having laid his own position bare. It wasn't a command from a king or a plea from a hero. It was a simple, honest statement from a man shouldering an impossible burden. Slowly, deliberately, Karui sheathed her sword. The sound was deafening. Kuretsuchi unfolded her arms. Temari gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't acceptance, but it was a start. The main plaza of Konoha was packed. Civilians and shinobi alike stood in silent, solemn rows, their faces a mixture of hope, curiosity, and deep-seated apprehension. This was history, and it felt heavy. An altar had been erected in the center of the plaza, draped in white cloth bearing the symbols of the 5 great nations. Naruto stood before it, once again in his formal robes, feeling the weight of 1,000 stares. The first 10 women, representing the most powerful of the initial clans, stood in a line facing him. Temari, Kuretsuchi, Karui, Hinata, and the others. They were dressed in formal attire from their own villages, a vibrant, clashing display of different cultures. They looked like queens of rival nations meeting on a battlefield to sign a treaty. Which, Naruto supposed, was exactly what they were. Kakashi stepped forward, acting as the master of ceremonies. His voice, amplified by a simple jutsu, carried across the silent plaza. Today, he began, we do not celebrate a marriage of love, but one of purpose. We do not bind 2 people, but the hopes of all people. In a world scarred by division, we forge a new bond. A living covenant. By this ceremony, the great clans of our nations unite under the House of Uzumaki, pledging their strength not to a single village, but to the world. They vow to stand together, to work together, to build a future of lasting peace. It was a good speech, Naruto thought numbly. Logical, inspiring, even, but the words felt hollow. This wasn't a fortress of vows. It was a prison, and they were all its first inmates. Kakashi produced a ceremonial scroll and a brush. Let the vow be sealed. He called the first name. Temari of the desert. Temari stepped forward, her expression unreadable. She took the brush, her movements precise, and signed her name on the scroll. It was a declaration, a contract. Kuretsuchi of Iwagakure. The Tsuchikage strode forward, signing her name with a quick, aggressive slash of ink. One by one, they came forward. Karui of Kumogakure, the delegate from the Yuki clan. And finally, Kakashi called, Hinata of the Hyuga. Hinata moved with a quiet grace, her face pale but resolute. As she took the brush, her eyes met Naruto's across the altar. In them, he saw her pain, her sacrifice, and her unwavering belief. It was a look that said, we are doing the right thing. It was the only thing that felt real in this entire charade. As Hinata finished her signature, a sudden, piercing whistle cut through the air. And then, the world dissolved into chaos. From the rooftops surrounding the plaza, dozens of smoke bombs exploded simultaneously. But this was not ordinary smoke. It was a thick, cloying, gray fog that shimmered with a sickly green energy. The moment it billowed over the crowd, chakra flickered and died. The shinobi in the crowd gasped, feeling their connection to their own power suddenly severed, choked off. A mass panic began to ripple through the civilians. Then the assassins struck. They descended from the rooftops like silent, black spiders, clad in form-fitting armor etched with glowing green lines, the source of the chakra suppression. They moved with terrifying speed and precision, ignoring the cage, ignoring Kakashi, ignoring Naruto. Their targets were singular. The 10 women standing at the altar. Naruto didn't hesitate. The world might have gone silent to other shinobi, but to him, connected to the vast reservoir of Kurama's chakra and the planet's own natural energy, the suppression field was merely an irritant. A layer of static over a roaring fire. Kurama. On it. A torrent of incandescent golden chakra erupted from him, a miniature sun that vaporized the smoke in a 20-foot radius around the altar. 6 paths sage mode ignited. His skin glowing, the black markings of the sage painting his face. He became a beacon of impossible power in a suddenly powerless world. But in the split second it took him to flare his power. The assassins were already there. 3 of them, armed with short, venom-slick blades, converged on a terrified delegate from the land of hot water. They never reached her. A roar of wind, sharp and powerful enough to tear flesh from bone, slammed into them. Temari, her great fan already open, stood before the smaller woman, her expression one of cold fury. You dare, she hissed, her eyes blazing. You dare attack us on sacred ground. You will be blown to dust. She swung her fan, and a cyclone of cutting wind erupted, forcing a half-dozen assassins to scatter. She wasn't just defending herself. She was commanding the battlefield, clearing sightlines, creating a defensive perimeter. On another flank, an assassin's blade whistled towards Karui's neck. She didn't even flinch. With a deafening clang, she drew her sword, the movement so fast it was a blur, and parried the strike. You want Kumo's strength, she roared, not at the enemy, but at the sky. Then see it. Her muscles bulged as she physically overpowered her attacker, her raw, chakra-less strength a terrifying force. She kicked him back, her blade already moving to engage two more. Clang, stomp, Kuretsuchi, seeing a group trying to circle around behind Tamari, stomped her foot. Even with the suppression field, her Kekkei Genkei was a part of her. A small but potent eruption of lava bubbled up from the stone pavers, creating a molten barrier that trapped the assassins. Get stuck, you bastards, she snarled, forming a hand seal. Lime congealing technique. A jet of white liquid shot from her mouth. Not quite the powerful jutsu it should have been, but potent enough. It struck an assassin, instantly hardening into a shell of binding quicklime, immobilizing him. In the midst of the chaos, Hinata was a point of calm. Her Byakugan was active, her pale eyes seeing everything. She moved not with the explosive force of the others, but with an eerie precision. Tamari-san, two on your left flank. Karui-san, the one behind you is a feint, she called out, her voice clear and carrying. An assassin lunged at her, and she met him with an open palm. Gentle fist. It didn't need explosive chakra, only the precise injection of it. Her strike hit his arm, and the limb went instantly limp as she severed the tenketsu points. He stared at his useless arm in shock for the 1 second she needed to drive her palm into his chest, stopping his heart. This wasn't a group of political delegates. It was a squad of elite, S-rank level kunoichi. Naruto became the storm's center. He moved faster than they could track, a golden blur of destruction. He formed a Rasengan, the sphere of pure chakra, a stark defiance of the suppression field around them. He slammed it into an assassin, the impact sending the man flying through the stone wall of a nearby building. A tailed beast bomb was too risky with so many civilians, but he didn't need it. His raw speed and strength were more than enough. He created a dozen shadow clones, each one a golden-hued master of taijutsu, and they fell upon the attackers, turning the tide in an instant. He saw it then, the synergy. It was unplanned, chaotic, but brutally effective. His clones would force an enemy back, right into a wind scythe from Tamari. Karui's wild, powerful sword swings would break an enemy's guard, leaving them open for Hinata's precise, disabling strikes. Kuretsuchi's lava pits dictated the flow of movement, funneling the assassins into kill zones. They were working together, born of necessity, forged in the heat of a sudden, shared battle. They were a unit. The assassins were elite, but they were not prepared for this. Their plan was to surgically remove the helpless political pawns. They had not planned on facing a coalition of she-devils led by a living god. Realizing their mission was a catastrophic failure, their leader gave a sharp whistle of retreat. Most of them disengaged, vanishing back into the chaos of the panicked crowd. They left behind 4 of their own, 2 dead, 2 immobilized by Kuretsuchi and Hinata. The golden glow around Naruto faded as he let Sage Mode recede. The plaza was a wreck. The altar was shattered. The crowd was screaming. But around him, the 10 women stood, breathing heavily, weapons ready, forming a protective circle. They were all looking at each other, not as rivals from Iwa, Suna, or Kumo, but as comrades. As fellow soldiers who had just survived the same battle. Then, their eyes turned to him. The suspicion was gone. The political calculation was gone. In its place was a raw, undeniable respect. He hadn't just stood by. He hadn't just been a symbol. He had been their shield, their sword, their unwavering protector. Shikamaru and a grim-faced Inoichi Yamanaka appeared at his side. Anbu guards dragging the 2 captured assassins forward. A real drag, Shikamaru muttered, surveying the damage. Security was airtight. This tech, it's better than anything we have. Let's see who sent them, Inoichi said. His voice cold as ice. He placed his hand on the head of the assassin Hinata had disabled. He closed his eyes, his mind delving into the man's psyche. Inoichi's body went rigid, his breath hitched. A look of profound confusion and horror crossed his face. "Inoichi?" Kakashi asked, stepping forward. The Yamanaka clan head stumbled back, his hand flying from the assassin's head as if burned. He was pale, his eyes wide with a deep, primal fear Naruto had never seen in the veteran shinobi. His mind, Inoichi stammered, his voice a horrified whisper. "There's nothing there. It's not wiped. It's not shielded. It's empty. A complete void." He took a ragged breath, trying to explain the impossible. There was just an echo. A single, chilling command, reverberating in the silence. Naruto stepped closer, his gut twisting into a cold knot. What was it? What was the command? Inoichi met his eyes, and his next words sent a chill down Naruto's spine that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Erase the confluence. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Serpent and the Fox. The Uzumaki compound rose from the earth like a prayer. Situated on a serene plateau overlooking the Nakano River. It was a deliberate fusion of Konoha's rustic woodwork, Suna's cool, thick-walled adobe, and Iwa's unyielding stone foundations. It was a statement in architecture, a place that belonged to everyone and no one. Built by the hands of shinobi from a dozen different nations. Construction was ongoing, the sounds of hammers now ringing with a clear, unified purpose, but the center. Al Hall and the first residential wing were complete. It was here, in a council room paneled with light, fragrant cedar, that the new world began to take shape. Naruto sat at the head of a large, circular table, a design he had insisted upon. There was no hierarchy here, only a circle of equals. To his right sat Temari, her fan resting against her chair, her gaze sharp as she reviewed a report on grain shipments. To his left, Kuretsuchi lounged in her seat, radiating a kind of bored impatience, though her eyes missed nothing. Hinata was next to her, a calming presence, her notes on the integration of the new residents into Konoha's social structure meticulous and insightful. Karui, Sakura, and 4 other women, chosen for their keen intellects and political acumen, filled the remaining seats. This was the Union Council, the governing body of Naruto's new, sprawling family, and the de facto political core of the Shinobi Alliance. "The reports from the land of water are troubling," Temari stated. Her voice cutting through the morning calm. "Piracy is up 17%. Our analysts suggest the attacks are too coordinated for common raiders. They're targeting specific supply lines, primarily those heading to Iowa." Kuretsuchi grunted. "Let them try. Our new coastal defenses will turn them to scrap metal. My concern is the fire daimyo." She tapped a finger on the table. "He's called his personal guard from the border patrols, citing internal security needs. He's consolidating his power, pulling back from the alliance's framework. He feels his influence waning," Hinata added softly. "As the Union strengthens, the old courts become relics. He is afraid." Naruto listened, absorbing the information. This was his new reality. Not battlefields and jutsu, but supply lines, political maneuvering, and the subtle wars fought with whispers and ink. He was a quick study, his mind, honed by years of unpredictable combat, surprisingly adept at seeing the feints and patterns in the political arena. "We'll reinforce the land of water patrols with a joint Suna-Konoha fleet," he decided. "Show a united front. As for the daimyo, let him hide in his castle." His power came from playing the villages against each other. That game is over. It was in this moment of decisive calm that the crisis arrived. The door slid open with a jarring bang, and a Konoha Chunin, breathless and pale, rushed in. He practically threw a scroll, still attached to the leg of a frantic-looking messenger hawk, onto the table. It bore the seal of the Tsuchikage. Kuretsuchi snatched it, her bored demeanor vanishing in an instant. She broke the seal and scanned the contents. The color drained from her face, replaced by a mask of cold, simmering fury. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What is it?" Naruto asked, his body tensing. Kuretsuchi looked up, her eyes locking onto Temari with an expression of pure accusation. "The Daiseki mine has collapsed. Our largest, most profitable source of high-density chakra ore. The one that was supposed to fund Iwa's entire reconstruction." A collective gasp went through the room. The Daiseki mine was the bedrock of Iwa's economy. Collapsed. Naruto pressed. How? An accident. No accident. Kuretsuchi snarled, her voice a low, dangerous growl. She threw the scroll onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped in front of Temari. The support pillars were destroyed. Deliberately. With advanced explosive charges. Temari's eyes narrowed as she read the scroll. Her composure, usually as unshakable as a desert monolith, fractured for a split second. A look of disbelief, then outrage, crossed her face. This is an accusation. It's more than that. Kuretsuchi shot back, rising to her feet. The report from our demolition experts is conclusive. The explosive residue contains granulated magnetic sand, a signature unique to Suna's assassination core. The silence that followed was absolute, a perfect, suffocating vacuum. The old world, the one of bitter rivalries and inherited hatreds, had just kicked down the door to their new one. Temari rose slowly, her expression now an icy mask of controlled fury. Iwagakure is accusing my village of economic terrorism. This is an outrage. Suna has no reason. No reason. Kuretsuchi laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Your people have been desperate Our chakra ore since the Kazekage sealed your trade agreement with the Land of Iron. Crippling our chief export would make you the sole supplier to half the continent. The motive is as clear as the sand on your boots. This is insane. Asuna Kunoichi at the end of the table shouted. The only thing insane is trusting you sand crawlers in the first place. An Iwa loyalist on Kuretsuchi's staff shot back from the doorway. Enough. Naruto's voice boomed, imbued with a sliver of chakra that made the very air vibrate. The shouting stopped instantly. All eyes snapped to him. This council does not descend into chaos. We are not the old cage, screaming at each other while the world burns. He stood, his presence commanding the room. Kuretsuchi, I understand your anger. Your village has been dealt a terrible blow. Temari, I understand your outrage. Your village's honor has been questioned. He looked between the two women, the twin pillars of his council, now poised to bring it all crashing down. An investigation will be launched immediately. A neutral party. There are no neutral parties in this, Uzumaki. Kuretsuchi countered. Either you stand with Iwa, your ally, or you stand with Suna, your other ally. The unspoken threat was clear. Choose a side. Naruto's gaze was unwavering. No, he said, his voice calm but absolute. You're wrong. He turned to his Hokage. Kakashi-sensei, I need the fastest transport you have. Get me to the land of Earth. A stunned silence fell. Shikamaru, who had been observing from a corner, spoke up. Naruto, that's a bad move. Walking into Iwa right now. They're furious. It'll look like Konoha is trying to interfere, to dictate terms. It's too aggressive. An investigation is aggressive, Naruto countered, his logic sharp and clear. It says, I don't trust you. So I'm sending my people to find the truth. It starts from a place of suspicion. He looked directly at a stunned Kuretsuchi. I'm not launching an investigation. I'm going to pay my respects. To offer my aid. I'm coming as a member of your family, to see how I can help my wife's village in their time of need. I will start from a place of trust. The sheer, audacious sincerity of the move was breathtaking. It was a political gambit of the highest order, wrapped in an act of simple, human empathy. He then turned to Temari. The accusation still hung in the air, but his next words sliced right through it. Temari, I need you here. You and Shikamaru. I want you to lead the intelligence gathering from Konoha. No one knows Suna's protocols, its weapon signatures, or its enemies better than you. Find out who would benefit from framing your village. Find me the real culprit. It was another move of staggering trust. He wasn't just absolving her, he was empowering her. He was handing the defense of the union's integrity to one of the accused. Temari was speechless, her mind, always 10 moves ahead, struggling to process the depth of his faith in her. She looked at him, truly looked at him. And for the first time, she saw not just a powerhouse or a political symbol, but a leader of immense and terrifying caliber. She gave a single, sharp nod. It will be done. Kuretsuchi, Naruto said, his voice softer now, you're coming with me. We fly to Iwa together. This was the final piece of his strategy. He wouldn't allow her to return to her village alone, to be swallowed by the anger of her council. She would be at his side, a visible symbol of their personal alliance, forcing her people to confront the reality of the union even as they cursed it. Kuretsuchi stared at him, her mind racing. She was trapped. To refuse would be a political disaster, a rejection of his aid. To accept meant standing with him against the tide of her own village's fury. He had outmaneuvered her completely. A slow, grudging respect began to dawn in her eyes. Fine, she conceded, but pack for a cold reception, Uzumaki. Iwagakure is not in a forgiving mood. The flight to Iwagakure was a tense, silent affair. They traveled on a giant ink bird summoned by Sai, the wind cold and biting at high altitude. Below them, the lush green of the land of fire gave way to the endless, rocky expanse of the land of earth. A landscape of brown and gray, like the bones of the world laid bare. As they approached the village hidden in the stone, Kuretsuchi finally broke the silence. You know this is suicide, right? My council is made up of old men who still have nightmares about your father. They see the yellow flash every time they look at a Konoha headband. They'll see your offer of aid as a trick, an attempt to make us dependent on you. Then it's a good thing I'm not wearing a headband, Naruto said simply. They won't be meeting the hero of Konoha. They'll be meeting the Tsuchikage's husband. Kuretsuchi scoffed, but there was no heat in it. You keep playing that card. You think it's a shield. No, Naruto replied, his eyes fixed on the approaching mountain range that housed the village. I think it's the truth. And the truth is the only thing they won't be expecting. Their reception was exactly as cold as Kuretsuchi had predicted. The Iowa Council Chamber W. As a cavernous space carved from living rock, the air thick with the smell of ozone and damp stone. The elders sat on stone thrones, their faces grim, their gazes like granite chips. Uzumaki Naruto, the council head, a gnarled old shinobi named Gano, said, his voice a gravelly rumble. Your presence here is unexpected and unwelcome. I came to offer my condolences and my aid, Naruto said, his voice calm and respectful. Echoing in the vast chamber. We do not need the condolences of a village that shelters our enemies, another elder spat. The evidence is clear. This was an act of war by Suna. They presented the evidence then. Shards of metal from the detonators, reports on the chemical composition of the explosive residue. It was professional, thorough, and utterly damning. Naruto didn't argue. He didn't refute. He listened patiently, his expression one of solemn concern. When they were finished, he simply nodded. The evidence is compelling. Your anger is justified. The elders were taken aback. They had expected denial, excuses. They had been prepared for a fight. They were utterly unprepared for agreement. But, Naruto continued, his voice resonating with a quiet power. I have known the people of Suna for many years. I have fought alongside their cage. I have bled with their shinobi. This is not their way. It is too obvious. Too loud. Suna's assassins are like the wind. You never see them coming. This is like a rockslide. It's meant to be seen. It's meant to start a fire. He looked at Kuretsuchi, who stood beside him, her expression unreadable. Your grandfather, the third Tsuchikage, taught you to see beneath the surface of things. To see the deception underneath the deception. All I ask is that you grant me the same courtesy you would grant him. Give me 3 days. Allow my partner in Konoha to look beneath the surface of this attack. If she finds nothing, then you have my word. I will support Iowa in any action it deems necessary. It was another masterful move. He invoked the name of their most revered leader. He validated their evidence while gently planting the seed of doubt. And he put himself on the line, his promise a powerful guarantee. The elders grumbled, their gazes shifting uncertainly. It was Kuretsuchi who sealed it. 3 days, she said, her voice ringing with the authority of the Tsuchikage. We owe our ally that much. He came here in good faith. We will honor it. The elders, faced with the united front of their Tsuchikage and the most powerful man in the world, had no choice but to relent. Naruto had won the first battle without throwing a single punch. He had bought the one thing he needed most, time. Back in Konoha, the strategy room felt like the calm eye of a hurricane. Maps covered the walls, Legends reports were stacked in neat piles, and the air hummed with focused energy. Tamari and Shikamaru stood over a large table, a diagram of the Suna explosive charge projected onto it. It's wrong, Tamari said. her finger tracing a line on the diagram. The magnetic sand is correct, but the detonator mechanism is all wrong. We use a 3-stage chakra pulse system for stability in unstable rock formations. This is a crude, single-stage chemical detonator, inefficient, loud. It's designed to leave a signature, not to be effective. A frame job, then, Shikamaru said, yawning. What a drag. So, who has access to our magnetic sand but not our detonator schematics? Traders, mostly, Tamari mused. We export the raw sand for industrial use. It's the detonators that are classified. Anyo, Nei could have bought the sand on the open market. So we track the supply, Shikamaru concluded. Find out who made a large, recent purchase of high-grade magnetic sand and the chemical components for this type of detonator. Their investigation was a whirlwind of efficiency. Cross-referencing trade manifests, import records, and informant reports, they narrowed the list down to a dozen potential shell corporations. One stood out. A textile import company based in the Fire Capital, owned by a merchant named Kichizo. His company had recently purchased a massive quantity of sand and sulfur, the key components. Got him, Tamari said with grim satisfaction. Too easy. He must be a cutout. A middleman. We need to be sure, Shikamaru said. We need to know who he's working for, and we can't risk him getting spooked. A direct interrogation is too risky. He looked at Tamari. Naruto left contingency plans. He authorized the use of a unique asset. A few minutes later, the door slid open. A young woman with vibrant red hair, glasses perched on her nose, and an Uzumaki clan crest stitched onto her tunic stepped inside. She had a nervous, twitchy energy, but her eyes were sharp and incredibly perceptive. Karen Uzumaki, Shikamaru said by way of introduction. Meet Tamari. Tamari's eyes widened slightly. Another Uzumaki. She knew the stories. The scattered, decimated clan. This woman was Naruto's family, his kin. Karen nodded, her gaze flickering between Tamari and Shikamaru. Shikamaru-san explained the situation. You need me to verify a subject's testimony without approaching him. Can you do that? Tamari asked, a hint of skepticism in her voice. Karen simply closed her eyes. Give me his name and location. Shikamaru pointed to a spot on the map. Kichizo. His main office is here, in the capital. Karen's brow furrowed in concentration. Her sensory perception was unlike any other. It wasn't just about detecting chakra levels, it was about reading the very flow and texture of it. The emotional state it betrayed. It was the mind's eye of the Kagura. He is agitated, Karen murmured, her eyes still closed. His chakra is erratic, spiking with fear. He is lying to his subordinates about the shipment. His chakra wavers, a clear sign of deception. He is waiting for a payment from a chakra signature that is odd. It's heavily suppressed, masked by some kind of seal. But the flow, it's arrogant, entitled, the kind I've sensed before among the court nobles. She opened her eyes, her red irises sharp and certain. He's a pawn for one of the daimyo's ministers. And his funding. This is the strange part. When I try to trace the chakra signature on the money he was given, there's nothing. It's like a black hole. No history, no residue. The Ryo exists, but it has no past. It just appeared. Tamari and Shikamaru exchanged a look. Untraceable funds. An agent of the daimyo. The pieces were locking into place. This was the conspiracy Naruto had worried about. That's it, Tamari said. Her voice cold as steel. She began scribbling a coded message. That's the proof we need. Back in Iowa, the third day was dawning, and the council's patience was wearing thin. Naruto and Kuretsuchi were summoned to the council chamber. The air was thick with expectation. Your time is up, Uzumaki, Gano rumbled. Have you found the truth you were looking for? Before Naruto could answer, an Iowa Jonin burst into the room, holding up a scroll. Tsuchikage-sama, we just intercepted a coded message, sent by messenger Toad from Konoha to the cage in Suna. Kuretsuchi took the scroll, her eyes narrowing. She read it, and her eyebrows shot up in surprise. She read it again, and a slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. Well, she said, looking at the council. It seems our enemies in Suna have been busy. She handed the scroll to Gano. Read it, aloud. The old elder took the scroll and began to read. It was Temari's report to Gaara, written in Suna's highest-level diplomatic code. Frame job is confirmed, Gano read, his voice laced with disbelief. The detonator was a crude imitation. Have tracked the materials to a merchant in the Fire Capital, a known agent of the Fire Daimyo's court. The arrogance of these people, to think they could mimic our craft and use our name to start a war. They seek to shatter the Union. We will not allow it. I am working with Konoha's strategists to identify the minister responsible. I will have his head on a platter for this insult to Suna's honor. The report continued, laying out every detail of their investigation. Every piece of evidence clearing Suna and pointing directly at the daimyo's conspiracy. By the time Gano finished reading, the entire council was silent, their expressions a mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning realization. They had been played. They had nearly declared war on an ally based on a lie that Suna itself was furiously working to expose. They had been a puppet in the daimyo's scheme. Naruto stood silently, letting the truth do its work. He had orchestrated the entire thing. Shikamaru's team had deliberately sent the toad on a flight path they knew Iowa patrols would intercept. The intercepted message was far more powerful than any report he could have given them. It was irrefutable proof, seen through the eyes of their enemy. Gano slowly lowered the scroll, his old, stony face filled with a new, profound respect as he looked at Naruto. You knew. I trusted. Naruto corrected him gently. I trusted my family. The crisis was over. The rage against Suna had transformed into a shared fury against a common enemy. The fragile union, rather than shattering, had been tempered in the fire of political intrigue, emerging harder and stronger than before. Later, as he and Kuretsuchi stood on a balcony overlooking the stone city, she nudged his shoulder. That was a hell of a move, Uzumaki. Devious as hell, letting us intercept that message instead of just handing it to us. She shook her head, a genuine smile on her face for the first time. My grandfather would have loved it. He always said the best victory is the one where your enemy thanks you for beating him. Naruto smiled back, watching the sun set over the mountains. He had won the battle. But he knew, with a chilling certainty, that the war against the serpents hiding in the courts, and the silent, hungry darkness that funded them, had only just begun. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Echoes of the Void. A fragile sense of normalcy had begun to settle over the Uzumaki compound. It was the quiet rhythm of a new life taking root. In the expansive central courtyard, the clang of steel on steel rang out, sharp and clear in the morning air. Naruto, clad only in simple training trousers, parried a swift, powerful sword strike from Karui. Her movements were explosive, a whirlwind of crimson hair and gleaming metal, each strike meant to overwhelm and shatter. Too slow, she barked, her blade a blur as she disengaged and spun into a low sweep. Naruto grinned, effortlessly leaping over the attack. Too predictable, he didn't use any overt power, no golden cloak or sage markings. This was about pure skill. About learning the rhythms of the women who were now his family. He'd learned that Karui's aggression was a mask for a keen tactical mind, that the quiet Yuki delegate fought with the cold, patient lethality of a glacier, and that Tenten, who was currently watching from the sidelines with Hanabi, could turn any object within arm's reach into a deadly projectile. Hanabi, having shed some of the stiff formality of the Hyuga clan for a more practical training uniform, called out, "He's leaving his left side open after every third exchange, Karui-san. Break his pattern." This was their new routine. Training, council meetings, shared meals. The tensions hadn't vanished. The Iwa and Kumo women still eyed each other warily, but the shared experience of the assassination attempt and the victory over the daimyo's plot had forged a grudging, but solid, foundation of respect. They were a single, albeit dysfunctional, clan now. The spar ended when Karui, fainting high, finally landed a solid kick to Naruto's ribs, knocking the wind out of him. She stood over him, panting, a triumphant smirk on her face. "Point to Kumo," she declared. Naruto just laughed, rubbing his side. Yeah, you got me." It was a simple, peaceful moment. And like all peaceful moments in their fractured world, it was destined to be shattered. It began not with a bang, but with a shudder in the earth and a single, piercing note from the bell in the village's sensory division tower. A moment later, a shadow fell over the courtyard. Everyone looked up. The sky, a brilliant, cloudless blue just seconds before, was now tainted by a web of dark lines, as if reality itself were cracking. Then Sasuke Uchiha fell out of the sky. He didn't land. He appeared, tumbling out of a swirling black vortex of his own Rinnegan portal, crashing into the courtyard with a jarring thud. He was haggard, his black cloak torn and smoking, his face pale with exhaustion and a deep, unfamiliar urgency. Sakura was at his side in an instant, her hands glowing with green medical chakra. Sasuke-kun, what happened? Sasuke pushed himself up, ignoring his injuries. His gaze, one Sharingan and one Rinnegan, was fixed on Naruto. There was no trace of their old rivalry in his eyes, only the grim understanding of one world saver to another. "They're coming, Naruto," he rasped, his voice rough. "I saw it, in one of Kagaya's dimensions. A world that was just gone. Picked clean, not harvested, erased." Naruto was already on his feet, his playful mood gone, replaced by the dead serious focus of a commander. "What is it, Sasuke? What did you see?" "An energy. It's not chakra," Sasuke explained, his words coming in a rush. "It's the opposite. A void. It undoes things. I felt a trace of it and followed it through a dozen dimensions. It led me back here. To our moon." As if on cue, the sky screamed. High above, the dark lines resolved into fiery trails. Dozens, then hundreds of them, streaking through the atmosphere. It looked like a meteor shower, but the trajectories were too precise, too uniform. "They were guided. Those aren't meteors," Sasuke stated, his voice grim. "They're remnants of the moon from when you fought Tonari. Chunks of rock and Otsutsuki constructs. And they are being piloted." The Emergency War Council convened less than 10 minutes later. The circular table in the Uzumaki compound was now crowded with Naruto, a hastily dressed Kakashi, Shikamaru, Sasuke, and the full Union Council. A projection from the Yamanaka clan's sensory unit showed a map of the world, now dotted with dozens of predicted impact sites. "They aren't random," Shikamaru observed, his usual laziness completely gone. "Look, they're targeting major travel hubs, resource depots, and the outskirts of the hidden villages. This isn't an invasion, it's a decapitation strike. They're trying to cripple our infrastructure and communication. The Alliance can handle the ground threats," Kakashi said, his voice firm. "I'll dispatch response teams to every impact zone. But this is just a symptom. We need to deal with the cause." All eyes turned to Naruto. This wasn't a political problem. This was a world-ending threat. This was his domain. "The moon," Naruto said, his voice a low growl. "They're controlling them from the moon." "Tonari's faction?" Kuritsuchi asked. "No," Hinata spoke up, her voice quiet but firm, drawing everyone's attention. "Tonari chose to protect the Earth. He would not do this. But the branch family of the Otsutsuki on the moon was vast. It is possible a remnant, loyal to the old ways, has found a new source of power." Her eyes glowed as she activated her Byakugan, staring up through the ceiling at the sky. "The energy animating those rocks, it is as Sasuke-san said. It is not chakra. It is like looking into a hole. It is empty." Naruto's mind flashed back to the feeling he'd had. The patch of silent nothing at the edge of the world. This was it. It was here. "I'm going up there," he declared. "We cut the head off the snake." "You'll need a team," Sasuke said. "Fighting in a vacuum is disorienting, and this void energy dissolves ninjutsu. You need specialists." Naruto's eyes scanned the faces around the table. His decision was instant, guided by a strategic clarity that left no room for sentiment. "Hinata," he said, "your Byakugan is our best tool for understanding this energy. Your lineage connects you to Hamura and the moon. You're with me." Hinata met his gaze and nodded, her expression resolute. "Hanabi," he turned to her younger sister. "Your mastery of the gentle fist is second to none. You're aggressive, a frontline fighter. 2 pairs of the purest Byakugan will give us an edge they won't expect." Hanabi's eyes lit up with a fierce pride. She gave a sharp, confident nod. "Mabui-san," he said, addressing a calm, dark-skinned woman from Kumo who had served as the 4th Raikage's aide. "Your village's heavenly transfer technique is the fastest way to move objects or people on a battlefield. Your sensory skills are legendary. We'll need your support." Mabui, representing Kumo, inclined her head. The Raikage has pledged our strength to the Union. I will serve. What about me? Karen demanded from the doorway, having sensed the commotion. My sensory abilities are Uzumaki born. I can pinpoint them. And that's why you're staying here, Naruto countered, his tone leaving no room for argument. You'll be the nerve center for the planet's defense. Coordinate with Ino's clan. I need you to be my eyes on the ground, to seek any trace of this void energy that makes it through. No one is better suited for it. Karen's protest died on her lips, replaced by reluctant understanding. He wasn't sidelining her. He was giving her one of the most important jobs. Let's go, Naruto said, his body already beginning to glow with the golden fire of his power. The rest of you, protect our home. Space was a silent, cold, and profoundly empty battlefield. Naruto flew through the void under his own power, a golden comet of pure energy, creating a breathable chakra bubble around his three companions. The earth hung behind them, a beautiful, swirling marble of blue and white. Ahead, the moon loomed, its familiar, pockmarked face now scarred with dark, crystalline structures that pulsed with a faint, sickly purple light. The energy is coming from the far side, Mabui reported, her eyes closed in concentration. From the ruins of the Otsutsuki citadel. I see them, Hanabi confirmed, her Byakugan active. Dozens of them. They look like Tonari's puppets. But they're wrong. Their movements are stiff, unnatural. As they breached the moon's low gravity, the puppets rose from the gray dust to meet them. They were humanoid figures, crafted from the same strange, porcelain-like material as Tonari's army, but their cores glowed not with green Tensagen energy, but with a swirling vortex of absolute black. In their hands, they carried staffs tipped with spheres of the same crushing nothingness. The battle began without a word. A puppet lunged at Mabui, its staff swinging. Before Naruto could move, a blur of motion intercepted it. Hanabi, 8 trigrams 64 palms. She yelled, her hands a dizzying flurry of strikes. Her attack, however, didn't have the intended effect. Instead of shutting down chakra points that didn't exist, each time her chakra-infused fingers touched the puppet's void-tainted shell, a small, violent explosion of energy erupted. The feedback sent her reeling back, her hands smoking. It's like matter and antimatter. She grunted, shaking her tingling fingers. My chakra is reacting violently to whatever that stuff is. It's a double-edged sword, Hinata realized aloud, appearing at her sister's side. It hurts us, but it also hurts them. We just have to be more precise. The puppets attacked in a wave. Naruto met them head-on. He formed a Rasenshuriken, its shrieking P.O. a stark contrast to the silence of space. He hurled it into the advancing mob. But as it neared them, the void energy emanating from their cores seemed to eat at it, causing the jutsu to unravel and detonate prematurely in a massive, but less focused, blast. Sasuke was right, Naruto grit out. They dissolved ninjutsu. This was a fight for taijutsu specialists. A dance of death on the lunar surface. Naruto became a golden whirlwind, his 6 paths sage mode granting him physical power that could shatter the puppets' bodies with a single blow. But they were numerous, and their void blasts were terrifyingly effective. One of them fired a beam that struck a nearby crater wall. The rock didn't explode or melt. It simply ceased to exist, turning into a puff of inert, gray dust. This was W. Here the team's synergy became their only hope. Naruto-kun, 3 o'clock. Hinata called out, her Byakugan perceiving the flow of an attack before it was launched. Naruto spun, deflecting a void beam with a Gudodama shield. At the same time, Hanabi charged forward, not with a full barrage, but with a single, focused strike. Gentle fist art. One body blow. She drove her index and middle fingers into a puppet's chest. The resulting explosion of reacting energy was contained, blasting the puppet apart from the inside out. Hanabi was thrown back by the recoil, but Mabui was there. Heavenly transfer technique. In a flash of light, Mabui teleported Hanabi out of the path of the explosion and repositioned her behind another group of puppets, allowing her to strike again. Mabui had become the team's linchpin. Her flawless sensory perception and instantaneous transport jutsu turning the chaotic battlefield into her own personal chessboard. Hinata, meanwhile, was their eyes. She saw not just the enemy, but the very nature of their power. Their attacks have a charge time. She relayed. The void energy has to coalesce in their core for 1.2 seconds before they can fire. Strike during the coalescence. It was a deadly, beautiful, and perfectly synchronized dance. Hinata's intel, Hanabi's precise, explosive attacks, Mabui's perfect positioning, and Naruto's overwhelming power. They moved as one unit. A four-person engine of destruction, carving a path through the legion of empty soldiers. They were not just the wives of the world's savior, they were a testament to why their villages were the strongest in the world. After what felt like an eternity, the last puppet crumbled to dust. The four of them stood, breathing heavily, in the silent, gray wasteland. Before them lay the ruins of the Otsutsuki citadel, a once beautiful palace of pearl and moonlight, now overgrown with the same dark, cancerous crystals they had seen from orbit. An oppressive, unnatural silence emanated from its gates. The source is in the main throne room, Mabui confirmed, her voice tense. They entered cautiously, weapons drawn. The interior was a nightmare. Intricate tapestries depicting the hist. Ori of the Otsutsuki clan were bleached of all color, their threads crumbling to dust at a touch. Ornate fountains were filled with fine gray powder instead of water. The very air felt thin, as if the concept of life itself was being slowly erased. In the center of the vast throne room, they found it. A strange, celestial device, like an ori made of black, humming crystal, was drawing energy from a rift in space behind the throne, a tear that looked into a dimension of pure, starless black. Channeled into this device was the last loyal Otsutsuki puppet, but it was twisted, broken, its porcelain body cracked and weeping a dark, viscous fluid. It wasn't fighting, it was twitching, its head spasming as if listening to 1,000 voices at once. As they approached, a holographic recording flickered to life from the device. Projected into the air above the babbling puppet, the image of a different Otsutsuki appeared. This one was ancient, his robes simple, his eyes holding not the arrogance of Kagaya or Momoshiki, but the placid calm of a philosopher. If this record is found, the ancient being's voice echoed, soft and sorrowful, then the heretic has been unleashed. A mistake made in the dawn of our clan. The image shimmered, showing a star chart. We Otsutsuki are gardeners. We plant the seed of the god tree, and we harvest its fruit. It is the cycle of life, of evolution. But there was one who saw it differently. He saw chakra not as a tool for evolution, but as a cosmic disease. A corruption of the pure, silent state of existence. He did not believe in harvesting worlds. He believed in purifying them. The star chart changed, showing a red, hungry star moving from system to system. But instead of planets blossoming with god trees, they simply winked out of existence, leaving black voids behind. He developed a power not from chakra, but from its opposite. The void, the silence between worlds, the power of non-existence. He was cast out, exiled to the empty dimensions. His name stricken from our records. But we could not destroy him. How can you kill that which is the embodiment of nothing? The mad puppet on the throne began to thrash, its voice a cracked, terrified screech. Speaking over the recording, the silence, the beautiful, beautiful silence is coming. It will cleanse the noise. It will answer the cancer of life. The recording's voice grew grim. He seeks to unmake all that is. To return the universe to the pristine, perfect void from which it came. He is the end of all things. He is the Star Eater. The divine heretic, Amatsu Mikabashi. The puppet on the throne gave one last, violent spasm, its body dissolving into a cloud of fine gray dust. The August star, it comes, to devour, the noise. The recording flickered and died. The Celestial device hummed one last time and fell silent. The oppressive energy vanished, the rift in space sealing itself. Naruto, Hinata, Hanabi, and Mabui stood in the silent, corrupted throne room, the chilling name echoing in their minds. This wasn't a conqueror. This wasn't a would-be god seeking power. This was an entity of pure, nihilistic ideology. A sentient whole in reality that saw their entire existence, their love, their pain, their struggles, their chakra, as a disease to be cured. The political plots of the daimyo, the squabbles over borders and resources, they all seemed like children's games now. The true enemy wasn't at their gates. It was at the edge of their reality, and it wanted to unmake everything. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. A King's Gambit. The return from the moon was a silent, grim affair. There was no elation of victory, only the crushing weight of revelation. Back in the Hokage Tower, the five Kage, Gaara, Darui, Chojuro, and Kuretsuchi, attending via a flickering, chakra-powered video link, listened with stony expressions as Naruto delivered his report. The chamber, which had once felt like the center of the world, now seemed small and fragile, a tiny bastion against an infinite, hungry darkness. When Naruto finished, the name Amatsu Mikabashi hung in the air like a death sentence. A being that consumes reality itself, Gaara stated, his voice a dry whisper that betrayed none of the horror he must have felt. This complicates matters. Complicates matters. Kuretsuchi's sharp laugh was devoid of humor. It makes our border disputes and trade agreements low. Okay, like a bunch of academy kids squabbling over lunch money. We've been preparing for the next war, not the end of the damn universe. The question is, what can we do? Darui rumbled, his usual languid posture replaced by a tense, forward lean. How do you fight something that isn't really there? Something that's defined by what it's not. We get smarter, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the rising panic. This thing works through proxies. It uses agents. It corrupts and manipulates. It turned a remnant of the Otsutsuki into its puppets. The daimyo's conspiracy, the untraceable funds, the attack on my union ceremony, it's all connected. The serpent in our garden has a master, and it's this, Star Eater. His eyes hardened. So we hunt the serpent. The Kage agreed. A new, top sector directive was issued across the Shinobi Alliance. All intelligence divisions were to shift their focus, to hunt for any trace of void energy, any agent speaking of a great silence, any technology that defied the laws of chakra. The world, whether it knew it or not, was now at war with a concept. But the most crucial lead wasn't in some foreign land. It was a piece of the moon that Naruto had brought back with them. A multifaceted data crystal, recovered from the celestial device that had powered the puppet army. It was cracked and leaking a dark, viscous energy, its code corrupted by the void. In a secure laboratory deep beneath the Konoha Intelligence Division headquarters, Sakura and Sasuke worked on the crystal. The air was cool and sterile, smelling of antiseptic and ozone. Sakura, in a lab coat over her uniform, maintained a delicate, life-sustaining medical jutsu around the crystal, her peerless chakra control preventing it from dissolving into dust. Sasuke stood beside her, his Sharingan blazing, his Rinnegan pulsing as he stared into the crystal's fractured heart, deciphering the corrupted, alien code one symbol at a time. It's a mess, Sasuke grunted, his eyes straining. The void energy didn't just damage the data, it unwrote it. There are holes in the code that are just gone. But there are fragments. Communication logs. Between who? Naruto asked, standing by the door with Shikamaru. The main Otsutsuki puppet, the one that babbled at the end, was the Nexus. It was receiving instructions, Sasuke explained. He paused, his Rinnegan focusing intently. But it was also sending data out. Reports. Schematics. Schematics for what? Shikamaru pressed. Sakura answered, her brow furrowed in concentration. For the chakra-suppressing technology used by the assassins at the ceremony. And, my god, detailed instructions on how to stabilize and channel raw void energy into a portable containment seal. It's a blueprint for a void bomb. A chill went through the room. Who was it sending them to? Naruto asked, his voice dangerously low. Sasuke was silent for a long moment, his eyes tracing the last, barely legible fragments of a transmission protocol. The receiver is heavily encrypted, masked, but the final relay point, the signal was bounced to a secure terminal right here in Konoha. He finally looked up, his gaze hard as obsidian. The access C-Ode belongs to the Konoha Elder Council's private network. The implication was a punch to the gut. The attack on the Union, the conspiracy to arm the daimyo with otherworldly weapons, the betrayal came from within their own government. Shikamaru's face was a grim mask. What a drag. To get that kind of access, it would have to be one of the two elders or their most trusted aide. Someone with the highest level of clearance. We need to move, now, Naruto said, turning to leave. And do what? Shikamaru challenged, stopping him. March into the council chambers and accuse them. Based on a corrupted piece of alien technology. The political fallout would be catastrophic. The clans loyal to the old guard would see it as a power grab, an attempt by you to purge the former Hokage's advisors. Why? I'd start a civil war the day after we learned the universe is ending. Naruto stopped, his fists clenched. He hated it, but Shikamaru was right. A public accusation was a blunt instrument, and this required a surgeon's scalpel. He couldn't afford to show weakness or division, not now. He had to be more than a hero. He had to be a king. Naruto did not go to Kakashi. He did not go to the Anbu. He went home. In his private study within the Uzumaki compound, a quiet, Spartan room with a large central table and walls lined with scrolls on strategy and history, he convened his own council. The women who entered were not the ones he would have chosen for a battlefield, but for this war, the one to be fought in the shadows, they were his most powerful weapons. Sakura Haruno arrived first, her medical coat exchanged for her standard uniform, her expression serious and analytical. She represented his past, a bond of loyalty forged in fire that was absolute and unbreakable. Ino Yamanaka came next, her confident stride belying the immense power she held. As the heir to the Yamanaka clan, her mind was a key that could unlock any secret, a tool more potent and more dangerous than any jutsu. The last to arrive was a woman named Setsuna Shihoin. Her clan had for generations served as Konoha's magistrates and legal advisors, masters of logic, rhetoric, and the intricate web of laws that held the village together. She was tall and composed, her dark hair tied in a severe knot, her eyes holding a calm, unnerving intelligence. Her marriage to Naruto had been a strategic move to bind the village's powerful judicial and intelligence sectors to the Union. Naruto closed the door, activating the privacy seals etched into the frame. He laid out the situation, presenting the data from Sasuke's analysis. When he finished, the room was silent, the three women processing the horrifying implications. Setsuna was the first to speak, her voice as crisp and precise as shattering ice. A public trial is out of the question. The suspect, whomever it is, will be a respected figure. Any accusation will be seen as politically motivated. It will create martyrs and factions. The village's morale, already fragile, would break. We also need to know why, Sakura added, her medical training extending to the psychology of a patient. This isn't just greed or a lust for power. To betray the village on this level, to ally with a force that sent those things from the moon, the motivation has to be powerful. Ideological. We can't fight it if we don't understand it. Ino leaned forward, her fingers steepled. I can get the truth. A direct mind read would give us everything. His identity, his motives, his company conspirators. But it's a one-shot weapon. The moment I enter his mind, he'll know he's been discovered. The mental intrusion, no matter how subtle, leaves a trace. We'd have to act on the information immediately, and we'd be back to the Civil War problem. They debated for an hour, their minds working in concert. Setsuna dissected the political angles, Sakura analyzed the psychological profile of their traitor, and Ino outlined the capabilities and risks of her clan's techniques. Naruto listened, absorbing it all. He wasn't the hot-headed kid who charged in anymore. He was a commander, utilizing the unique strengths of his most trusted officers. Finally, he synthesized their counsel into a single, audacious plan. We won't do a public trial, he began, his voice low and steady, and we won't do a direct interrogation. We'll do a confrontation, a private one. He looked at Ino. You won't read his mind. You'll be my weapon. You won't take information, you'll project it. He then turned to Setsuna and Sakura. And you two will be my witnesses. We won't just expose a traitor. We will break his ideology. And then, we will use him. The plan was cold, pragmatic, and utterly ruthless. It was the gambit of a king, not a hero. The three women looked at him, and in their eyes was a shared, steely resolve. They understood the stakes. Elder Tsubaki was a man carved from tradition. He had succeeded Homura Mitokado on the Konoha Council, and like his predecessor, he was a staunch traditionalist. He saw the world in black and white. The civilian authority of the daimyo was the legitimate government, and the shinobi villages were merely their military arm. He entered the Uzumaki compound with a barely concealed distaste, viewing the rising structure as a monument to Naruto's hubris, the seat of a military coup in slow motion. He had been summoned for a private briefing on the emerging cosmic threat. An invitation he couldn't refuse. He was led to Naruto's study, a room he found insultingly simple for a man of such station. Naruto sat behind the table, flanked by Sakura and Setsuna. A picture of formal authority. Elder Tsubaki. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Naruto said, his tone perfectly cordial. The threat you described is of the utmost importance, Lord Uzumaki, Tsubaki replied. His voice dry and formal. The council must be kept apprised of all developments. Of course, Naruto said with a nod. He spent the next 10 minutes giving tease. Ubaki, a sanitized version of the events on the moon, focusing on the Otsutsuki puppets and the danger they posed. He was laying the trap, lulling the elder into a false sense of security. Then, he changed the subject. The technology these puppets used, it was disturbingly similar to the chakra-suppressing tech from the attack on the plaza. Tsubaki's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. A coincidence, perhaps. The Otsutsuki are known for their advanced techniques. Perhaps, Naruto mused, but we were lucky enough to recover a data crystal from their command device on the moon. He slid a small, crystalline object across the table. Sasuke Uchiha was able to decrypt it. It turns out the puppet was not only receiving orders, it was transmitting data. Schematics, blueprints, to a collaborator, here on Earth. Tsubaki remained silent, his face a stony mask, but Naruto could see a flicker of panic deep in his eyes. The strangest thing, Naruto continued, his voice dropping to an almost conversational tone, is that the technology didn't go to the daimyo's court, or some rogue nation. It went to a terminal right here in Konoha. He pushed a small data pad across the table, its screen glowing. On it was a single line of alphanumeric code. A Konoha Council internal network ID. Tsubaki's ID. The elder stared at the code, his mask of composure finally cracking. He looked up, his eyes blazing not with guilt, but with a sudden, righteous fury. You dare accuse me? I'm not accusing you of anything, Naruto said calmly. I'm presenting the facts. Now, you're going to give me the truth. The truth. Tsubaki shot to his feet, his voice trembling with decades of repressed indignation. You want the truth. The truth is that the shinobi system is a plague. A cancer that has been killing this land for generations. My grandfather died in the First War. My father died in the Second. I watched my friends die in the Third, all for the glory of some Hokage, some clan, some pointless feud over a patch of dirt. He gestured wildly at the room, at the compound beyond. And you are the culmination of that disease. A military dictator in all but name, uniting the very weapons that have bled us dry into a single unstoppable force. You speak of peace, but you are building the greatest army the world has ever known. Where does it end, Uzumaki? When you've conquered the world and there's no one left to fight. So this was it. The motive Sakura had predicted. He was a zealot, a misguided patriot. The daimyo, the true rulers of this land, they see it, too, Tsubaki spat. But they are weak, afraid. Then, a new patron came to them. Someone with the vision and the power to restore the proper order. A promise of a world cleansed of the shinobi plague. A world of true peace, governed by law, not by jutsu. And you believed them, Naruto said, his voice laced with a terrible pity. You believed their lies. They are not lies, Tsubaki insisted. They gave us the means to fight back, to restore balance. Balance. Naruto stood up, his sheer presence silencing the elder's tirade. He was no longer the cordial host. He was the sage of six paths, and his voice carried the weight of the world he had saved. Let me tell you about your new patrons, elder. Let me tell you about the peace they offer. He told him everything. He described the erased world Sasuke had seen. He spoke of Amatsu Mikabashi, the entity that saw life itself as a disease. He explained the great silence, the final, perfect peace of absolute non-existence. Your patrons don't want to end the age of shinobi, Naruto said. His voice a cold, hard whisper. They want to end the age of everything. We are just the first course. Tsubaki stared at him, his face pale, his conviction wavering for the first time. You're lying. It's a trick, is it? Naruto's eyes met Ino's in the reflection of a polished scroll case. He gave a single, almost invisible nod. Ino, hidden in the next room, placed her fingers in a ram's seal. She didn't invade Tsubaki's mind. She didn't steal a single thought. She opened a one-way channel and pushed a single, pure concept through it. She gave him the feeling. The raw, undiluted sensation that Naruto had felt in Sage Mode at the edge of the world. The soul-crushing terror of the silent void. The absolute certainty of being a tiny flicker of warmth about to be extinguished by an infinite, indifferent cold. The horror of non-being. The peace of the graveyard. Elder Tsubaki screamed. It was not a sound of pain, but of sheer, existential terror. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his head, his face a mask of horror as his mind was brushed by the truth of the great silence for a single, eternal second. The link was cut. He was left gasping on the floor, his ideology, his life's conviction, shattered into a million pieces by one horrifying touch of the truth. He looked up at Naruto, his eyes filled with a new, profound terror. What have I done? Naruto looked down at the broken man, his expression grim. The time for anger was past. This was the time for judgment. You betrayed this village, your home, and your world, to a force you did not understand. The punishment for that is death, Naruto stated, his voice flat and absolute. Tsubaki closed his eyes, accepting his fate. But, Naruto continued, you are more useful to me alive. The elder's eyes snapped open. Your patrons believe you are their loyal servant on the Konoha Council. You will continue to be. You will feed them whatever intelligence I tell you to feed them. You will report their every plan, their every communication, to me. You will work to undo the damage you have wrought, and you will help me dismantle the daimyo's conspiracy from the inside out. Your life is no longer your own. It is a tool. My tool, until this war is over. He leaned down, his voice a final, chilling whisper. Do you understand your penance, Tsubaki? The old man, his face streaked with tears of terror and regret, could only nod. Naruto stood up, his gambit a success. He had faced the serpent in his own house not with a blade, but with the truth. He had not only neutralized the threat, he had turned it into his most valuable asset in the shadow war to come. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Heart of the Union. 2 months had passed since the chilling revelation on the moon. 2 months of tense quiet. Of a world holding its breath. The hunt for the serpent, Elder Tsubaki, now a terrified and pliable asset, was yielding a slow but steady stream of intelligence on the daimyo's conspiracy. The Shinobi Alliance, now fully aware of the cosmic threat, moved with a grim, silent efficiency, hardening defenses and sharing intelligence on a level previously unimaginable. But within the walls of Konoha, and especially within the ever-growing Uzumaki compound, a different kind of tension was building. The fragile camaraderie forged in battle was beginning to fray under the mundane pressures of cohabitation. 50 kunoichi from dozens of different clans, each with their own customs, pride, and ingrained prejudices, were now living under one roof. The union was a political reality, but it was not yet a family. Minor squabbles over kitchen duties escalated into pointed remarks about clan honor. Disagreements over training schedules became heated debates on the superiority of one village's fighting style over another. The house was united in purpose, but divided in spirit. Naruto felt it every day. He saw it in the rigid posture of the women at the breakfast table, the way they sat in clearly defined cultural blocks. He was the pillar of their world, but the ground beneath that pillar was beginning to crack. He brought his concerns to the Union Council, now held in the completed, sun-drenched chamber of the new compound. It's not enough to be an army, he said, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his most trusted advisors. We have to be more than that. The people of the villages. They need to see this union as a source of hope, not just a military pact. And we need to remember how to live, not just how to fight. Kuretsuchi leaned back, her arms crossed. What are you getting at, Uzumaki? You want us to hold a poetry reading? I want to hold a festival, Naruto announced. The statement was met with stunned silence. Tamari was the first to recover. A festival, Naruto. We are on the brink of a war with a cosmic entity that eats reality. We have spies from the daimyo in our own backyard. We don't have time for frivolities. That's exactly why we need it, Naruto countered, his voice filled with a conviction that commanded their attention. Our enemies, both in the courts and in the void, want us to be afraid. They want us to be paranoid, to huddle in the dark and sharpen our weapons until we turn them on each other. A festival is an act of defiance. It tells them we are not afraid. It shows the world that the union is not just strong, but joyful. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto a shadow in the rafters where he knew Urut Anbu, now loyal to him, was watching. And it gives the daimyo's spies something impressive to report back to their masters, a vibrant, united, and utterly confident new power rising in their midst. It's a psychological weapon, and a celebration, all in one. A slow understanding dawned on the faces around the table. Shikamaru, who had been invited to observe, let out a slow breath. A feint on a global scale, showing happiness to mask preparations for war. It's devious, a total drag to organize, but devious. And so, the festival of the unbroken bond was declared. The compound buzzed with a new, chaotic energy. Committees were formed, plans were drawn, and for a time, the old tensions were sublimated by the shared, monumental task of throwing the world's most politically significant party. It was in the crucible of these preparations that two opposing forces were destined to collide. Chiyoko was a daughter of the Mifune clan, the samurai of the Land of Iron. Her marriage had been one of the most crucial, binding the neutral samurai nation to the shinobi alliance. She was the embodiment of her homeland. Discipline, order, and tradition were the core of her being. Her every movement was precise, her speech was formal, and her katana, which she never let stray more than an arm's length from her side, was a part of her soul. Hinu was her polar opposite. Hailing from a small, nomadic clan in the northern territories allied with the Inuzuka, she was a beast tamer of legendary skill. She was wild, her sun-streaked hair a permanent mess, her clothes practical leather and fur, and her constant companion a giant, silver-furred wolf named Jin. She was instinct, freedom, and the untamed spirit of the natural world. They were put on the committee for the festival's public exhibitions, a decision made by a well-meaning but naive Konoha administrator. Their first meeting was a declaration of war. The central exhibition must be a demonstration of sublime control, Chiyoko stated, her voice as crisp as a winter morning. I propose a mass-coordinated Iijutsu kata. 300 shinobi, moving as one. It will display our unity, our discipline, our shared will. Hinu, who was scratching Jin behind the ears, let out a snort. Sounds boring. People want a show, not a nap. We should do a release of the summons. Toads, slugs, monkeys, my pack, a grand, chaotic display of the raw power of nature bound to our side. It will show our strength, our connection to the wild heart of the world. Chiyoko's eyes narrowed to slits. Uncivilized. A display of beasts is hardly a fitting symbol for this new age. We are building a world of order, not returning to the mud. Your order is a cage, Hinu shot back, getting to her feet. Jin rising with a low growl beside her. You can't feel the pulse of the world with a stick up your. Enough. A third committee member intervened before the argument could escalate. But the lines had been drawn. To Chiyoko, Hinu was a savage. To Kinu, Chiyoko was a relic. The day of the festival dawned bright and clear. Konoha was transformed. Banners ring the crests of 100 different clans hung from every building, a vibrant tapestry of unity. The air was filled with the smells of sizzling squid from Kumo, sweet dumplings from the land of hot water, and spiced meat from Suna. The streets were a river of people, a living testament to the peace Naruto had fought so hard for. He spent the day making his rounds, not as a king, but as a host, a friend, a part of the celebration. He found his way to the sparring grounds first, where a friendly tournament was in full swing. The cheers of the crowd were a welcome balm to his soul. He arrived just in time to see Tenten, in a rare display of competitive fire, defeat a Jonin from Kiri with a dazzlingly complex new weapon scroll that unleashed a whirlwind of interconnected kusarigama. Next challenger, Tenten called out, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow, a proud grin on her face. I'll take a turn, Naruto said, vaulting over the railing into the ring. The crowd roared. Their spar was a masterpiece of speed versus technique. Naruto, relying purely on his taijutsu, flowed like water, while Tenten was a storm of steel. She had dedicated her life to her craft, and it showed. She pushed him, forced him to adapt, to anticipate. The match ended when he finally managed to get inside her guard, his hand stopping a millimeter from her throat. You've gotten faster, he said, genuinely impressed. And you've gotten better at holding back, she replied with a wink. It was a comfortable, easy camaraderie, a reminder of their shared history as Konoha Genin with impossible dreams. Later, he was cornered near a bustling merchant's tent by Setsuna and a sharp-eyed woman named Amy, whose clan controlled several major trade routes in the land of tea. They unrolled a scroll on a nearby crate, revealing a meticulously detailed plan. The old trade agreements with the minor nations are exploitative, Amy explained, her finger tracing a shipping route. They were designed by the daimyo's courts to keep them dependent. We've drafted a new charter, a union-sponsored fair trade agreement. It will build goodwill and strengthen their economies, making them less susceptible to the daimyo's influence. Naruto studied the proposal. His questions were sharp and insightful, honed by months of council meetings. What about tariffs? How do we ensure the land of Earth doesn't see this as a threat to their own exports? He was no longer just a warrior. He saw the battlefield in its entirety now, and he knew that wars could be won with grain and commerce as surely as with kunai and jutsu. He gave his approval, feeling a swell of pride in the incredible intelligence he was now surrounded by. His good mood was soured when he passed the central plaza. He arrived to see Chiyoko and Kinu in a heated, public standoff. Their respective exhibitions were scheduled next, and their argument over precedence had reached a boiling point. Your flea-bitten menagerie will not muddy the stage before a sacred display of swordsmanship, Chiyoko declared, her hand on her katana. My flea-bitten menagerie has more honor than a glorified dancer who's never seen a real battle, Kinu retorted, her hand resting on Jin's neck. The wolf's lip was curled back in a silent snarl. Naruto stepped between them before jutsu could be drawn. The crowd parted for him, their whispers dying in his presence. Both of you, he said, his voice calm but radiating an authority that could not be ignored. Walk with me. He led them away from the crowds, away from the noise and the celebration, his silence a heavy cloak over their anger. But before he dealt with them, he needed to find his own center. He found it, as he always did, with her. Hinata was in the quiet garden that adjoined the newly expanded memorial stone. The stone now bore names from Suna, Iwa, Kumo, and Kiri, a silent, heartbreaking testament to the price of their new peace. She was tracing the name of her cousin, Neji, her expression serene but tinged with a deep, private sorrow. She sensed his approach and turned, a soft smile on her lips. Naruto-kun, are you enjoying the festival? I'm trying, he said, sighing as he stood beside her. He looked at the endless list of names. Sometimes I wonder if they'd think all this politics and ceremony, was worth it. Hinata placed her hand gently on his arm. It was a simple gesture, but it grounded him like nothing else could. They didn't die for politics, Naruto-kun. They died for moments like this. For the sound of children laughing in the streets. For the chance for rivals to share a meal in peace. They died for the hope of it. And you are making that hope real. He looked at her, at the unwavering belief in her pale eyes, the quiet strength that had been his anch. Or since the day she had stood against pain for him. He was a husband to 50 women, a king to a united nation, a pillar for the entire world. But here, in this quiet garden with her, he was just Naruto. And she was his heart. He reached out, his hand covering hers on his arm. Thank you, Hinata, he whispered. Amidst the chaos of his new life, she was his true north. His spirit settled. Naruto led the still fuming Chiyoko and Kinu to the edge of the compound, to where the final section of the great outer wall was being constructed. He stood before the half-finished structure, a mosaic of stone, wood, and adobe. Look at this wall, he said, his voice quiet. He pointed to the base. That is Iwagakure stone. It is rigid, unyielding, and strong. It provides the foundation. He then pointed to the internal framework. That is Konoha timber. It is flexible, resilient, full of life. It allows the wall to bend instead of break. Finally, he indicated the thick, reddish plaster. That is Suna adobe. It endures the heat and the cold. It protects the wood from the elements and holds the stones together. He turned to face them. They are completely different. Their natures are opposed. But if you built this wall of only stone, a powerful enough impact would shatter it to dust. If you built it of only wood, it would rot and collapse. If you built it of only adobe, the first rain would wash it away. He met Chiyoko's gaze. Your discipline, your order, your precision, it is the stone. It is our foundation. It is the shield that protects us. Then he turned to Kinu. Your instinct, your connection to the wild. Your untamed spirit, it is the wood. It is our resilience. It is the spear that strikes when the shield holds. He looked between them, his expression serious. Their differences, working together, are what make the wall strong. To ask the stone to be like the wood is to weaken the entire structure. I am not asking you to be the same. I am asking you to find a way for he shield and the spear to work together. The union needs both. He left them there, the weight of his words hanging in the air between them. It was not an order. It was a lesson, and a plea. As night fell, the festival reached its crescendo. The entire village, along with the delegates and the residents of the compound, gathered in the main plaza for the fireworks display. Laughter and music filled the air. Naruto stood on a balcony overlooking the plaza, Hinata at his side, a rare, genuine smile on his face. For a moment, it was all worth it. For a moment, there were no cosmic threats, no political conspiracies. There was only peace. And then, the sky broke. It happened without a sound. High above them, a perfect circle of blackness appeared in the starry sky. It wasn't a cloud, it was an absence. A hole. The stars behind it were gone. The fireworks that exploded near it were simply snuffed out. A collective gasp went through the crowd as the circle grew, a silent, creeping void it seemed to drink the very light and sound around it. Then, things began to spill out. They were not creatures, not in any recognizable sense. They were shimmering, formless blots of anti-reality, silent, drifting horrors that looked like tears in the fabric of space. Panic, sudden and absolute, erupted. The things drifted down into the plaza. They did not attack. They did not need to. A lantern stand they touched turned to a puff of fine gray dust. A section of stone paving they floated over became inert, colorless powder. They were living entropy, and they unmade everything they touched. Shinobi reacted instantly, hurling kunai and unleashing jutsu. The kunai passed through the creatures as if they weren't there. The fireballs and water dragons unraveled into nothingness a foot from their shimmering surfaces. Get the civilians out, Naruto roared, leaping from the balcony and landing in the center of the plaza. He entered Six Paths Sage mode in a heartbeat, a golden sun against the encroaching darkness. That fissure is the source. I have to seal it. He created a massive Rasengan, a spinning sphere of pure, positive life energy, and hurled it not at the creatures, but at the hole in the sky. It met the void and stopped, a raging battle between creation and uncreation playing out 1,000 feet above their heads. Naruto had to pour every ounce of his chakra into maintaining it. His feet digging into the ground. He was the anchor, the dam holding back the flood. He couldn't move. The wives, his queens, became the line of defense. They moved without orders, a coordinated response born of shared instinct. Temeri's wind created currents that pushed the void creatures away from the largest groups of civilians. Sakura and her medical teams organized the evacuation. And in the heart of the chaos, the spear and the shield found their purpose. A group of terrified children were trapped in a playground, a half dozen of the entropy blots drifting towards them. Chiyoko was there in a flash. She didn't try to attack them. Her blade was a silver blur, a perfect circle of defense. It was a samurai technique not for killing, but for creating a sanctuary of steel, a zone so perfectly controlled that nothing could enter. The void creatures bumped against the invisible wall of her swordsmanship and were deflected. She had created a shield, but she could not move the children. Hinu saw it from across the plaza. Jin, she yelled. Her giant wolf, a creature of pure, untainted natural energy, seemed uniquely resistant to the void's effects. He bounded through the chaos. A silver streak of life in a dying world. He reached the playground, gently nudging the children onto his back with his massive head. He then carried them out of Chiyoko's sanctuary and to the safety of the shelters. As the last child was saved, Chiyoko and Kinu locked eyes across the plaza. There was no animosity, no rivalry. There was only a deep, profound, and wordless respect. The shield had held, and the spear had struck. With the civilians clear, Naruto let out a final, world-shaking roar. Kurama's power surged through him, turning his golden cloak into a blazing inferno. He poured it all into the Rasengan. The sphere of light expanded, consumed the darkness, and slammed the fissure in reality shut with a blinding flash that turned the night into day. Silence returned. The plaza was scarred with patches of gray dust, the chilling remnants of what had been unmade. But the people were safe. The festival was in ruins, but its true purpose had been achieved in a way no one could have planned. Naruto, breathing heavily, looked out over the scene. He saw his wives, his family, tending to the injured, comforting the terrified, standing together. He saw Chiyoko formally bowing to Kinu, who bowed back. He saw Jin licking a crying child's face. The void fissure had been a message from Amatsu Mikabashi, a warning of the silence to come. But as Naruto watched the chaotic, vibrant, and unbreakable life of his new family working as one, he felt no fear. He felt only the powerful, defiant beat of a single, united heart. And he knew it was a sound the void could never silence. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. Tides of War. The first reports trickled in like a nervous whisper before the scream. A Konoha patrol skiff, tasked with monitoring the shipping lanes off the eastern coast of the Land of Fire, sent a single, garbled message. Unnatural fog. Water is wrong. Before going silent. An hour later, the coastal town of Shiodome, a sleepy fishing port, was wiped off the map. Not by an explosion, but by a single, colossal wave that rose from a placid sea on a cloudless day, scrubbing the coastline clean before receding as if it had never been. By noon, the whisper had become a roar. A fleet, vast and gray as a storm front, had materialized from the mists that had shrouded the land of water for months. It was a silhouette of jagged spars and war banners, an armada of a size not say end since the bloody age of the clan wars. Kurigakure, the village hidden in the mist, the reclusive and unpredictable nation that had remained stubbornly neutral to the Union, had declared war. The NAWS hit the Uzumaki compound's war room with the force of a physical blow. The large, circular chamber, usually a hub of calm, strategic debate, was now a maelstrom of frantic energy. Sensory ninja relayed damage reports. Strategists shouted for maps, and the air itself felt thin, stretched to its breaking point by the sudden, incomprehensible crisis. Naruto stood before the central projection map, a glowing topographical layout of the Fire Nation's coastline. Dozens of red icons, representing the Kiri fleet, were moving in a swift, merciless crescent formation, threatening to cut off the entire eastern seaboard. His wives, the members of his Union Council, stood around him, their faces a mixture of shock and grim determination. But all eyes, whether they meant or not, kept flicking towards one figure. Yugiri stood slightly apart from the others, her face as pale as the mist of her homeland. She was from a respected clan of strategists in Kurigakure, her marriage to Naruto a tentative, fragile bridge to the isolationist nation. Now, that bridge was burning, and she was stranded on the wrong side. She stared at the map, at the symbols of the ships of her own people, and her hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists at her sides. She was not just watching an invasion, she was watching her past rise up to murder her future. Their speed is impossible, Shikamaru stated, his voice tight with strain as he collated reports. They're not relying on wind or currents. The sea itself seems to be propelling them. Our coastal defenses are being overwhelmed before they can even mount a response. Who is leading them? Naruto demanded, his eyes never leaving the map. Chojuro would never authorize this. He's a man of peace. A Konoha intelligence officer, a veteran of the Anbu, stepped forward, his voice grave. Our sources within Kiri went silent weeks ago, Lord Uzumaki. But the last reports spoke of a shift in power. A new figure has risen. A priest-warrior named Ryujin Ishinagi. He's a charismatic fanatic from a minor religious sect who claims the age of the Mizukage is over. A crusade, Setsuna Shihoin murmured, her legal mind immediately grasping the terrifying implications. This isn't a war for territory. It's a holy war. His rhetoric matches the profile, Sakura added, pulling up a file on a separate screen. He preaches that the great union of clans, this confluence of chakra, as a blasphemy against the natural order. He claims it angers the seas, the most ancient and pure of all spirits. As the pieces snapped together, a cold, heavy silence fell over the room. This wasn't a political move. This was the next attack from Amatsu Mikabashi, cloaked in the robes of religious fanaticism. It was then that an old, respected Konoha elder on the Strategic Council, a man named Kosuke, turned his gaze fully on Yugiri. His voice was laced with suspicion. How could a fleet of this size mobilize without our knowledge? Unless, he added, his meaning clear, our listening post within the land of water was deliberately kept in the dark. The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Every eye in the room now fell on Yugiri. She was the enemy within, the symbol of their vulnerability. Yugiri's head snapped up, her expression a mask of wounded pride. Are you accusing me of treason, Elder Kosuke? The timing is convenient, the elder pressed, unmoved. Your people are slaughtering our shinobi as we speak. How can we possibly trust you with the strategic data in this room? That's enough. Naruto's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He moved from the map to stand beside Yugiri, a simple, powerful gesture of solidarity that stunned the room into silence. He didn't look at Kosuke. He looked at Yugiri, his eyes searching hers. Tell me what you see. Yugiri took a shaky breath, the fear and hurt in her eyes solidifying into the cold, analytical gaze of the strategist she was raised to be. She pointed a trembling but steady finger at the map. He's wrong. Kosuke-sama is wrong. And so is the fleet. What do you mean? Naruto asked gently. The formation, she explained, her voice gaining strength with every word. The lead ships, the vanguard, they're from the Hazuka and Yuki clans. Powerful, but reckless. The supply ships are lagging, unprotected. And the command vessel, she zoomed in on the largest icon at the rear of the fleet. It's not a warship. It's the Amatsu Maru, the flagship of the Ishinagi priesthood. A ceremonial vessel. This isn't the disciplined, patient strategy of a Mizukage. This is the arrogant, headlong charge of a zealot who believes the sea itself will win his battles for him. This is not a state-sanctioned war. It's a coup, a crusade led by a madman. She looked up at Naruto, her eyes pleading with him to believe her. I do not know this Ryujin. He does not speak for my village. He speaks only for his own ambition. Naruto listened, his expression unreadable. The room was silent, waiting for his judgment. He turned to face the entire council, his gaze sweeping over Kosuke, over a wary-looking Kuretsuchi, over everyone who harbored a seed of doubt. Yugiri is a pillar of this union. She is my wife, he stated. His voice calm but imbued with an absolute, unshakable authority. Her loyalty is to this family, and to the peace we are building. To question her is to question my own judgment. It is to question the very foundation of this alliance. He let the words sink in, a clear and undeniable line in the sand. There will be no more talk of treason. The subject is closed. He then turned back to a stunned Yugiri. The look of gratitude and relief on her face was profound. He hadn't just defended her. He had affirmed her place, her worth, her belonging. But that leaves us with a problem, he continued, his voice shifting back to that of a commander. We are facing a zealot who commands the ocean itself, leading a fleet of the most dangerous naval warriors in the world. He looked her directly in the eye, his next words a burden and a gift of staggering weight. Tell us how to beat your home, Yugiri. The battle for the coast of the Land of Fire was a scene from a drowning nightmare. The makeshift alliance fleet, a collection of converted merchant ships, Suna sand skiffs hopelessly out of their element, and a few heavily armored Iowa transport barges, was being systematically annihilated. Ryujin's power was terrifying. He stood on the deck of his ceremonial flagship, a tall figure in white and blue robes, his arms outstretched not in command, but in prayer. And the sea answered him. The very water around the alliance ships began to boil, the steam hissing as it peeled the wood from their hulls. Great, solid spears of seawater, hard as diamond and tainted with the telltale shimmer of void energy, launched themselves from the waves, punching through the strongest defenses. Overhead, a perpetual, unnatural storm raged, but only above the Kiri fleet, cloaking them in mist and lightning while the alliance ships baked under a clear, open sky, perfectly visible targets. From a fortified command post on the coastal cliffs, Naruto and his commanders watched the slaughter. Yugiri stood at the head of the strategy table, her voice a stream of calm, precise commands that were the only thing holding their defense together. Iowa barges, focus your fire on the Hazuka clan ships. They'll overextend, they always do. Suna contingent, use your wind style to disperse the steam, give our archers a clear line of sight. We can't beat them with power. We have to outthink them. Her strategies were brilliant. She guided a squad of Kumo shinobi, fast enough to run on water, on a daring raid to cripple the rudders of the Kiri supply ships, forcing the vanguard to halt their advance. She used her knowledge of ancient sea channels to help a squadron of Konoha forces lay a minefield of explosive tags in a location the Kiri fleet would be forced to pass through. She was dismantling her own people's legendary naval advantage piece by piece. But it wasn't enough. At the center of the enemy fleet, Ryujin was an untouchable god. He had created a massive whirlpool, a swirling vortex of sea and void energy that served as an impenetrable fortress, and from its eye, he directed the ocean's wrath. It was then that the voice slid into Naruto's mind. It wasn't a Yamanaka technique. It was something else, something colder. Can you feel it, confluence? The voice was serene, melodic, yet utterly devoid of warmth. It was Ryujin, the righteous anger of the sea. It rejects your unnatural union, your chaotic blending of chakra. It is a sickness, a blight upon the world. Naruto stood his ground, focusing his will, refusing to let the psychic intrusion show on his face. Who are you? He projected back, another puppet dancing on a void wielder's strings. There was a flicker of what might have been amusement. The great silence is not a puppeteer. It is a purifier. It offers a peace your world of endless war cannot comprehend. I have seen it. I have felt its grace. Surrender your blight of a world, Uzumaki Naruto. Let the ocean wash it clean and return it to the pristine silence that is its destiny. Not a chance, Naruto thought back, his resolve hardening into diamond. On the strategy map, the last of their forward ships was crushed by a colossal wave. Yugiri's face was pale. We can't break his central formation. The whirlpool is drawing in power from the ocean itself. He's a fortress we cannot breach. Naruto looked at the map, at the raging sea beyond the cliffs, at the desperate faces of his commanders. He looked at Yugiri, who had given everything she had, fighting a war against her own heart. He had asked her how to beat her home. She had given him the answer. Now, it was his turn to act. Keep the evacuation going, he said, his voice suddenly calm. He turned and walked towards the entrance of the bunker. Naruto, where are you going? Shikamaru demanded. Naruto paused at the edge of the cliff, the sea spray misting his face. Yugiri gave us the strategy. I'm going to provide the tactics. He walked to the very edge of the precipice, overlooking the entire chaotic battlefield. He closed his eyes, sinking into sage mode. He didn't just feel the natural energy of the cliffs around him. He reached deeper. He felt the tecton, icy plates sleeping beneath the continent. He felt the ancient, unshakable power of the land itself, the deep, foundational strength of the world that had been his home, his playground, his battlefield. The world he had sworn to protect. He drew on it all. Kurama's power surged, merging with the sage energy, cloaking him in a golden shroud of unimaginable intensity. He raised his hands, palms facing the raging ocean. He did not form a jutsu. He did not gather a sphere of chakra. He pushed. It started as a tremor in the seabed. Then, a deafening roar that was not sound, but pure force. A wave of golden, primordial energy. The very will of the continent made manifest, slammed into the ocean. Ryujin, from the center of his whirlpool, felt it. His serene expression shattered, replaced by F shock and disbelief as a power antithetical to his own met the sea. The ocean, for the first time, was not obeying him. It was being commanded. The sea did not part in a neat, biblical line. It was shoved, screaming and protesting, back upon itself. A wall of water, miles high, was forced away from the shore, held in place by Naruto's titanic will. The unnatural storm above the Kiri fleet dissipated as its connection to the sea was severed. The great whirlpool collapsed, its power source gone. In its wake, a vast, empty corridor of exposed, muddy seabed was created, stretching from the shore directly to the heart of the now beached, helpless Kiri fleet. The great warships of Kurigakure were stranded, their hulls groaning as they listed uselessly in the muck. From the command bunker, the Alliance commanders stared in stunned, silent awe. Naruto, standing on the cliff's edge, holding back two oceans with his bare hands, opened his eyes. He looked down at the waiting Alliance army, the shinobi of Konoha, the Earth-style specialists of Iwa, the wind-side wielders of Suna. The battlefield, he projected, his voice booming across the shore, is ready. And the army charged, a great tide of shinobi flowing down onto the seabed, storming towards the stranded, terrified fleet. The tides of war had just been turned, not by a ship or a sword, but by the will of a single man. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Star Devourer's Herald. The seabed was a canvas of chaos. The charge of the Shinobi Alliance was a tidal wave of earth and steel, crashing against the stranded, helpless ships of Kurigaka. Iwa Shinobi, in their element for the first time, raised great walls of mud to isolate the vessels, turning the open battlefield into a series of deadly traps. Suna puppeteers, their scrolls unrolling in the dry, churned air, sent scorpion-tailed marionettes scrambling up the groaning hulls. The naval warriors of the mist, peerless on water, were now clumsy and slow in the thick muck, their movements hampered. Their greatest weapon, the ocean itself, held at bay by the distant, golden figure on the cliffs. Morale on the Kiri ships was shattering. They were fanatics, true believers in their priest-king. But their faith was being ground to dust beneath the sheer, logical impossibility of their situation. Their god of the sea had been silenced, shackled by a man who now commanded the very earth beneath their feet. From the deck of the grand, ceremonial flagship, the Amatsu Maru, Ryujin Ishinagi watched the slaughter of his crusade. He radiated an aura of profound, inhuman calm. There was no anger on his handsome face. No fear, only a kind of serene disappointment, like a teacher observing a student who had failed to grasp a simple, elegant truth. He raised a hand. He did not form a seal. He simply gestured, and a silent, invisible wave of force radiated from him. It was not chakra. It was pressure. Absence. The hundreds of Alliance shinobi fighting around his ship were thrown back, not by a physical impact, but as if the very space they occupied had suddenly decided to eject them. They landed in the mud 100 yards away, unharmed but disoriented, leaving a perfect circle of clear, empty seabed around the flagship. The fighting stopped. A million eyes turned to the lone figure in white and blue robes. His voice rolled across the manufactured silence, amplified not by jutsu, but by the void itself, speaking directly into the minds of everyone present. It was a voice of hypnotic calm. Uzumaki Naruto, the voice declared, its serene tones a chilling contrast to the carnage. It was directed at the golden figure on the cliffs. You hide behind your armies. You wield your power from a distant god playing with mortal lives. You are a king of cowards. Naruto's golden aura flared, his focus shifting from the ocean walls to the man who now commanded the battlefield's attention. Face me, Ryujin's voice continued, a challenge that was both a thr and an invitation to a higher debate. Let us end this tiresome spectacle. Let us see which power is true. Your chaotic, diluted confluence of 1,000 desperate wills, or the pure, singular, and absolute focus of the eternal void. Your union against my silence. One man against another. One truth against another. The challenge was audacious, arrogant, and brilliant. It was a move to reclaim the narrative, to turn his strategic defeat into a trial by combat, a test of ideologies. Naruto knew he had no choice. To refuse would be to validate the herald's claim of cowardice. To let his army continue to fight would be a needless sacrifice when the enemy leader was offering himself up. This was the only path. He slowly lowered his hands. The titanic walls of water, held back by his will, began to tremble. The roar of the returning ocean began to echo across the seabed. You have until the sea reclaims this land, Naruto's voice boomed back, a promise and a ticking clock all in one. He launched himself from the cliff, a golden meteor streaking across the sky. He landed softly on the muddy ground 100 feet from Ryujin, the impact sending out a silent ripple of power. The duel for the fate of the world had begun. Naruto didn't waste time with words. He attacked. His speed was a golden blur, closing the distance in a fraction of a second, his fist, charged with the immense physical power of his sage mode, aimed directly at Ryujin's serene face. The herald didn't move. He didn't block. He didn't dodge. He simply watched the attack come. A foot from his face, Naruto's fist, which could level a mountain, simply stopped. It was as if it had hit a wall of invisible, unbreakable glass. But there was no impact, no shockwave. All the kinetic energy, all the power, just vanished. Naruto leapt back, his eyes wide with disbelief. Your power is crude, Ryujin said, his voice maddeningly calm. It is the thrashing of a child in a tantrum. It is noise, and the void is the master of all noise. Ryujin raised a hand, and the air in front of him seemed to fold in on itself, creating a long, shimmering line of pure blackness. It was a blade made of nothing. He swung it, not with the speed of a shinobi, but with the graceful, deliberate motion of a calligrapher. Naruto dodged, his instincts screaming. The void blade sliced through the air where he had been, and a thick, on-hulled anchor from a nearby wrecked ship that was in its path was bisected. But it wasn't cut. The two halves didn't fall apart with a clang. The section of metal the blade had touched was simply gone, erased from existence, leaving two perfectly smooth, cauterized edges behind. This was a power that didn't just break the rules. It unwrote them. Naruto switched tactics. If raw power was ineffective, he would use overwhelming, complex power. He created two shadow clones, and together the three of them began to form his ultimate jutsu. The shriek of the wind gathering, the swirling vortex of the Rasengan. The addition of Kurama's lava-like chakra, the tailed beast sage art, lava-style Rasenshuriken. He hurled the massive, spinning disk of molten destruction at Ryujin. Such a complex and angry noise, the herald murmured. He didn't even try to stop it. He simply created a small, fist-sized sphere of blackness in the air before him. The Rasenshuriken, a jutsu that had wounded a god, flew towards it, and then simply vanished into the tiny sphere, swallowed without a trace, like a drop of rain into the ocean. The tiny black sphere then winked out of existence. Naruto was stunned. Every tool in his arsenal, every technique that had saved the world, was being negated as if it were a parlor trick. Ryujin went on the offensive. He didn't run. He glided, the mud of the seabed refusing to touch his robes. Void blades materialized around him, a storm of silent, unmaking cuts. Naruto was forced onto the defensive, using his truth-seeking orbs as shields, the only thing he had that could withstand the erasure effect. But each block cost him. The orbs themselves seemed to shrink, their power being eaten away. You see, Ryujin's voice echoed in his mind again. You gather power from 1,000 sources. The fox within you, the energy of the world, the spirits of the dead. Your chakra is a chorus of screaming voices. It is loud, but it is unfocused. My power comes from one source. The ultimate source. The perfect, singular, silent truth of non-existence. It is quiet, and it is absolute. A void blade, faster than the rest, slipped past his defenses. It grazed his arm. Naruto cried out, not in pain, but in sheer, horrifying shock. It didn't bleed. It didn't burn. A neat, inch-wide strip of his flesh and Jonin jacket was simply gone. Erased, leaving a horrifying, grayish wound of pure nothing behind. On the cliffs, Sakura screamed his name, her medical instincts recoiling from a wound that defied every law of biology. It was a wound that could not be healed, because there was nothing there to heal. Naruto was in trouble. For the first time since the war, he was facing an opponent whose core philosophy was a direct counter to his own, and it was winning. On the command cliff, chaos had turned to horrified silence as they watched their leader being dismantled. The wives stood together, a knot of desperation and fierce, impotent rage. He's losing, Karui grit out, her hand gripping her sword hilt so tightly her knuckles were white. We have to do something. Interfering would be a dishonor to his duel. Chiyoko, the samurai, countered, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. It was Yugiri who found the middle ground, her strategist's mind cutting through the panic. It is not a duel of honor. It is an execution. That thing is not a warrior. It is an avatar. We are not watching a fight. We are watching a concept try to erase a man. She turned to the others, her eyes blazing with a newfound fire. He is our husband. He is the heart of our union. And we are not going to let him die. Quote, a new resolve settled over the group. They were not going to interfere. They were going to participate. Karen and Hinata moved to the front, their sensory abilities pushed to the absolute limit. It's not a solid energy field. Karen yelled, her eyes squeezed shut, the mind's eye of the Kagura perceiving things no normal sensor could. It's a vibration, a frequency. His body is resonating with that void. He's like a tuning fork. She's right, Hinata confirmed, her Byakugan seeing the waves of invisible force pouring into Ryujin from a source she couldn't pinpoint. He's a conduit. We don't have to break him. We just have to break his connection. Yugiri's mind flashed back to her studies in the mist. The Ishinagi priesthood. Their rites are based on harmonic resonance. Chants, bells, mantras. They believe a specific frequency can align a soul with the spirit of the sea. Or, in his case, with the spirit of the void. He's tuning himself to it. A frequency can be disrupted, said Setsuna Shihoin, her sharp, legal mind seeing the logical loophole. She turned to the sealing core specialists among the wives, a group that included Karanen. Several others from minor clans with Fuinjutsu traditions. We need a counter-resonance. A sealing formula that doesn't trap, but broadcasts. A complex, multi-layered harmonic wave of pure chakra. Can you do it? The Fuinjutsu experts looked at each other. It was a wildly theoretical concept. But they saw Naruto take another erasing blow, his golden cloak flickering, and they knew they had no other choice. They began to unroll massive scrolls, their hands flying as they painted complex, interlocking circles of ink, weaving together a seal the world had never seen before. Down on the seabed, Naruto knew he was being beaten. But he was not yet broken. He understood now. He couldn't win by overpowering Ryujin. So he would win by outthinking him. He created 100 shadow clones. They didn't charge. They spread out, attacking from every conceivable angle. More noise. Ryujin sighed, swatting them away with waves of erasure. Clones vanished in puffs of smoke, but not before they relayed what they had learned. The erasure field extends 3.2 inches from his body. The void blades take 0.4 seconds to form. He has a blind spot directly below him when he glides. Each clone was a sacrifice, a data point in a desperate equation. Naruto was no longer just fighting. He was mapping his enemy, feeding a constant stream of tactical information to the women on the cliff, trusting them to find the answer he couldn't see. The roar of the returning sea was now a deafening, thunderous wall of sound. The water was only minutes away. The grand, intricate sealing array on the cliff was complete, a beautiful, complex web of ink and hope that pulsed with a gentle, rainbow-colored light. It's ready, Setsuna yelled over the din. But its range is limited. He has to get closer. Hinata, Tamari commanded. Hinata nodded, and using her Byakugan, she precisely tracked Naruto's movements. Tamari unfurled her great fan. Wind style. Great sickle dance. She didn't attack Ryujin. She sent a fully controlled blast of wind that struck the ground behind Naruto, propelling him backwards, sending him tumbling right to the edge of the cliff base, and directly into the seal's effective range. Now, Setsuna screamed. The sealing team poured their chakra into the array. It didn't explode with power. It sang. A complex, multi-layered harmonic chord of pure chakra washed over the battlefield. It was the antithesis of the herald's single, monotonous frequency of nothingness. It was a symphony against a monotone. Ryujin cried out, his serene composure finally shattering. For the first time, he looked not like a god, but like a man in agony. His connection to the void, the source of his power, was being scrambled by the chaotic, beautiful noise of the seal. His perfect shield of nothingness flickered, wavered, showing static-like cracks of reality. It was the opening. A single second. Naruto was already there. He had trusted them, and they had delivered. He held a Rasengan in his palm. But it was unlike any he had ever created. It was his golden sage energy, yes, and the fierce red of Kurama's chakra. But swirling within it, like a captive galaxy, were 100 different colors and textures of light. The emerald green of Sakura's will, the deep violet of Hinata's heart, the stormy gray of Kuretsuchi's resolve, the sky blue of Temari's intellect, the wild crimson of Karui's spirit. It was the chakra of all his wives, a focused, unified expression of their shared soul. He called it the Union Rasengan. He didn't aim for Ryujin. He aimed for the flicker in his shield, the flaw in his connection. The impact was not an explosion. It was a resolution. The perfect, absolute purity of the void could not withstand the chaotic, flawed, and beautiful reality of so many different hearts beating as one. Ryujin's ideology was erased by the very thing he had called a weakness. He screamed as the void, no longer under his control, turned on him. His body began to dissolve, not into dust, but into pure information. A backlash of the cosmic truth he had tried to wield. In his final moment, his mind, stripped of all its barriers, projected its last thoughts, its final revelation, directly into Naruto's. The images, the concepts, were staggering. He saw it, a Matsu Mikabashi, not a being, but a place. A conscious, sentient wound in the fabric of spacetime. A living void, and he felt its ancient, patient hunger. It is drawn to concentrations of life, of chakra, the herald's final thought echoed, a frantic, final warning. It is a law of cosmic nature. The greater the light, the deeper the shadow it casts. Your union, you have gathered the brightest souls of your world into a single point. You have become the most brilliant candle in an infinite darkness, and you have called the storm that will snuff you out. Ryujin Ishinagi vanished. The last echo of his consciousness faded into the roar of the returning sea. The two great walls of water crashed back together where he had stood, a final, thunderous punctuation mark on the end of the duel. Naruto stood alone in the churning, violent water, the victor. His family was safe. His world was safe, for now. But he was now burdened with a truth more terrifying than any he had ever imagined. His greatest strength, the love and unity of his family, was the very beacon that was drawing the end of all things directly to their doorstep. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Shattered Throne. In the quiet, tense days following the Battle of the Coast, a deceptive calm settled over the world. The Shinobi Alliance, now operating with the grim efficiency of a body that had stared into the abyss, fortified its borders and hunted the shadows. The name Ryujin Ishinagi was a whisper on the lips of every intelligence agent, a ghost story that was all too real. But the true war, Naruto knew, was still being fought not with jutsu, but with lies. The meeting took place in the deepest, most secure chamber of the Uzumaki compound. A place shielded by a dozen layers of fuinjutsu. Only two men were present. Naruto, and the trembling, broken man who had once been Elder Tsubaki. He has taken the bait, Tsubaki reported, his voice a dry rasp. He couldn't meet Naruto's eyes, instead staring at the polished floor as if it held the secrets to his salvation. The Fire Daimyo's chief minister, Lord Arima. He believes every word. Naruto reviewed the intelligence. Tsubaki, his new, unwilling serpent in the court, had performed his task perfectly. The story he had fed the daimyo's conspiracy was a masterpiece of strategic deception, crafted by Shikamaru and Temari. It told a tale of a shinobi alliance on the brink of collapse. Naruto's parting of the sea had supposedly drained him, leaving him in a weakened, volatile state. The battle had decimated their forces. Morale was at an all-time low. The Union, the report claimed, was fracturing, with the wives from different nations blaming each other for the near disaster. And the summit? Naruto asked, his voice flat. They believe it is a desperate move, Tsubaki said. That you are calling an emergency cage summit in the land of iron to project a strength you no longer have. They know you are taking your full Union Council. Lord Arima sees it as the perfect opportunity. All his enemies, all the upstart warlords, gathered in a single, vulnerable location. They believe we are the prey. Walking willingly into their trap, Naruto murmured, a flicker of cold fire in his eyes. Yes, my lord, Tsubaki whispered. Good, Naruto said, standing. That is exactly what I want them to believe. Your penance continues, Tsubaki. Keep feeding them what we give you. You are dismissed. The elder bowed low, a man hollowed out by his own treason, and scurried from the room. Naruto was left alone in the silence. He was setting a trap of his own, using the world's leaders as bait. The gambit was dangerous, the stakes absolute. One miscalculation, and the entire world order would be decapitated in a single stroke. Before their departure for the neutral land of iron, he stood with Sakura and Temari on the balcony of his study, overlooking the compound. The setting sun tinted the sky in hues of orange and violet. This is reckless, Sakura said, her voice tight with worry. We're walking into a cage of our own design. All of Konoha's greatest victories have been born of recklessness, Temari countered. Though her own gaze was troubled, she looked at Naruto. You are certain of your asset. Tsubaki can be trusted. He can be trusted to be terrified, Naruto replied grimly. He has felt the touch of the void. He fears it more than he fears the daimyo, and he fears me more than he fears the void. He will not betray us. He looked out at the horizon. This has to end. The daimyo and their conspiracies have been the source of 100 years of war. We cut off one of the serpent's heads in Ryujin, but the body still squirms in the shadows. It's time to burn out the nest, once and for all. His voice was calm, devoid of anger or doubt. It was the voice of a man who had accepted the terrible calculus of leadership, that sometimes, to build a lasting peace, you must first be willing to risk absolute war. The great summit hall of the Land of Iron was a monument to neutrality. Carved from the heart of a mountain, its walls were unadorned gray stone, its ceiling a vast, vaulted dome. It was a place designed to humble egos, to remind those within its walls of their smallness in the face of the world's unyielding nature. Today, it was a powder keg. The five cage sat at a granite table shaped like a pentagon. Behind them, in silent, ordered rows, sat the members of the Union Council. 50 of the most powerful kunoichi in the world, an unprecedented gathering of grace and lethality. Their presence was a statement, a living symbol of the new world order Naruto was building. The summit began, the air thick with grim purpose. Gaara delivered a rapport. On the movements of Amatsu Mikabashi's energy signatures, tracked by Suna's long-range sensors. Darui outlined a plan for a global rapid response force. The discussion was tense, pragmatic, the talk of leaders preparing for Armageddon. It was in the middle of a debate over resource allocation that it happened. A low hum filled the chamber, a dissonant, sickening frequency that made the teeth ache. A sickly, green-black light flared to life, not from any single point, but from the very mortar between the stones of the wall. Intricate, spidery ceiling formulas, hidden for weeks by spies and saboteurs, blazed into existence. Enveloping the entire chamber, with a deafening boom that shook the mountain, the two massive, 30-foot-tall steel doors at the entrance slammed shut. The green-black energy washed over them, and the dull metal began to glow with the same unnatural light. The chamber was no longer a hall. It was a tomb. Chaos erupted. The cage were on their feet, weapons drawn. But before they could act, the second wave of the trap sprung. The Land of Iron's samurai guards, the legendary peacekeepers who lined the walls, suddenly drew their katana. But these were not the honored blades of their ancestors. The metal hummed, glowing with a faint, malevolent energy. Anti-chakra scientific ninja tools. From hidden panels in the walls, 100 more figures emerged. The daimyo's elite guard, the crimson magistrates, clad in full, crimson-lacquered samurai armor that was a terrifying fusion of ancient design and modern, illicit technology. Their faces were hidden behind demonic menpo masks, and in their hands, they held weapons that hissed and sparked with contained void energy. A massive viewscreen flickered to life on the wall behind the now sealed doors, revealing the face of the fire daimyo. Lord Tenjin. He sat upon his ancient chrysanthemum throne, a fan held delicately in his hand, his expression one of perfect, aristocratic calm. Esteemed Cage. Lord Uzumaki, he began, his voice silky smooth, dripping with condescension. My sincerest apologies for this interruption. A necessary, if unpleasant, bit of political sanitation. What is the meaning of this, Tenjin? Darui roared, his body already crackling with black lightning. The meaning, the daimyo said with a sigh, is the restoration of order. For too long, you shinobi have run rampant, waging your brutal wars, wielding powers that no mortal should possess. You have bled our nations dry. This, shinobi union, is the final arrogance. A military coup that seeks to usurp the rightful authority of the courts. I am simply correcting this imbalance. He smiled, a cold, reptilian thing. My agents will report that Uzumaki Naruto, in a fit of megalomania, attempted to assassinate you all to seize absolute power. His wives, driven mad by their unnatural bond, assisted him. It is a tragedy, but from the ashes of your unfortunate demise, a new, more stable world will be born. One free from the tyranny of ninja. He gestured to the captain of his guard. Begin. The battle was instant and absolute. The crimson magistrates charged. Their primary targets were the cage. Their void-laced pawns were a direct counter to large-scale jutsu, their armor resistant to all but the most powerful physical blows. A massive figure, a 7-foot-tall brute in an advanced, reinforced exoskeleton of crimson steel, the daimyo's personal champion, the shogun, ignited a greatsword of pure void energy and charged directly at Naruto. The head of the snake is mine, he bellowed. Naruto met his charge, a golden blur of 6 paths energy. Their clash was a thunderclap of power that blew a crater in the granite floor, the force of their duel immediately separating Naruto from the others, just as the daimyo had planned. The cage prepared for battle, but they were outnumbered, their powers suppressed by the ambient, low-level anti-chakra field generated by the seals on the wall. They were the targets, the prizes to be claimed. But the daimyo and his puppets had made one catastrophic, fatal miscalculation. They had seen the 50 women behind Naruto as political pawns. As hostages. As wives. They had failed to see them for what they truly were, a goddamn army. As the first wave of magistrates bore down on Gaara, they were met not by a shield of sand, but by a hurricane. You want to restore the old order? Temari roared, her great fan snapping open. Then die in the past where you belong. She was no longer just a strategist, she was a tempest. Her wind scythed through the front ranks, but the magistrates' armor held. They're too heavily armored, someone yelled. Then break them, a voice snarled. Kuretsuchi slammed her palms on the floor. She couldn't manifest a huge flow of lava, she could create a localized eruption of superheated, razor-sharp obsidian shards that shredded the legs of the charging samurai. The cage or the target? Chiyoko's voice rang out, clear as a bell. Formation Delta, shield the center. Quote, what happened next was a symphony of deadly efficiency. Chiyoko and the other weapons specialists formed a living wall of steel around the 5 cage, their blades a blur, deflecting the humming void lances of the magistrates. Their pure skill, their kenjutsu and bukijutsu, was unaffected by the anti-chakra field. The vanguard was led by Karui and Hanabi. Karui was a red-haired demon. Her longsword carving arcs of destruction, her sheer physical strength shattering the crimson armor plate by plate. Hanabi was a whirlwind of precise, deadly grace, her tle fist strikes finding the minute gaps in the armor, striking the joints and pressure points beneath, disabling the samurai with terrifying efficiency. 8 trigrams. Revolving heaven. She yelled, becoming a spinning vortex of chakra that sent a dozen magistrates flying. The battlefield became a multi-front war, conducted by a single, 50-souled organism. Yugiri and Setsuna, the strategists, were not fighting. They stood near the back, their eyes scanning the glowing seals on the walls. It's a parasitic seal, Yugiri deduced. It's not self-powered. It's drawing on the chamber's own energy grid. Cut the source, and it will fail. They directed the Fuinjutsu specialists, who began to work on a counter-seal, protected from attack by the other wives. Sakura was everywhere at once. She was not just a medic. She was a force of nature. She would heal an injured ally with a flash of green chakra, then spin and drive her fist into an enemy, the impact of her monstrous strength turning the advanced armor to scrap metal. She was the heart of their defense, ensuring no one stayed down for long. The cage, the most powerful shinobi in the world, found themselves in the surreal position of being protected. They watched in awe as the women they had bound to Naruto in a political pact fought with a synergy and ferocity that rivaled their own elite guards. They were not a harem. They were a legion, each woman a hero, fighting for her king, her family, and her world. Naruto's fight with the shogun was a brutal, destructive affair. The void-powered armor was strong, the greatsword a terrifying weapon of erasure. But the shogun was just a soldier. Naruto was a force of nature. He weathered the storm, his movements economical, his Gudodama shields deflecting the worst of the blows. He wasn't just fighting, he was watching, analyzing. He saw the flicker in the armor's power core every time the greatsword was swung. He saw the slight delay in the exoskeleton's reaction time. He saw a man hiding inside a machine. And then, he ended it. He fainted high, then dropped low, his fist, not carrying a Rasengan, but charged with the pure, focused energy of Sage Mode, striking not the armor, but the floor beneath the shogun's feet. The granite exploded upwards, throwing the behemoth off balance. In that single moment of vulnerability, Naruto was on him, ripping the helmet from the armor and driving 2 fingers into the man's neck in a gentle fist strike he had learned from watching Hinata. The shogun collapsed, unconscious. Naruto stood over the fallen champion and looked up at the viewscreen. The fire daimyo's calm, triumphant expression had been replaced by a mask of disbelief and horror. It's over, Tenjin, Naruto said, his voice quiet but carrying across the now quieting battlefield. His wives had won. The last of the Crimson Magistrates were being disarmed. He looked past the screen, as if his gaze could pierce the thousands of miles between them. You thought this was about power and thrones. You are so much smaller than you know. He began to speak, revealing everything Tsubaki had told him. He spoke of the daimyo's secret meetings, of their patron, of the promise of a cleansed world. He laid the entire conspiracy bare. As he spoke, Ino, protected by a wall of Iwa stone, touched a communications node on the wall. Her chakra flowed into it, hijacking the daimyo's own secure broadcast signal and patching it through to the international network. Suddenly, the feed from the summit hall was being played in every hidden village, in every major city, on every screen capable of receiving it. The world was watching. You allied yourself with a power that wants to unmake this world, Naruto continued, his voice now broadcasting to millions. You were their pawn, their useful fool. And now, your time is over. The fire daimyo, his face pale with sweat, his plot exposed to the entire world, could only stammer. You have no right. Right. Naruto's voice was cold iron. The age of shinobi dying for the whims of kings is over. The age of scheming lords who send children to die for their thrones is over. He raised a hand, a single, perfect Rasengan spinning to life in his palm. He looked directly into the camera, at the daimyo, at the world. Today, we declare a new age. One world, one people, under one banner of peace. And there are no thrones in it. He didn't throw the Rasengan. He slammed it, with all his strength and all his conviction, into the granite floor of the summit hall. Miles away, in the fire capital, within the opulent throne room of the daimyo's castle. The ancient chrysanthemum throne, a symbol of 1,000 years of unbroken rule, cracked. A spiderweb of fissures spread across the lacquered gold and polished jade. Then, with a sound like tearing history, it shattered, exploding into 1,000 pieces. The daimyo stared, dumbfounded, at the wreckage of his legacy, destroyed not by an army, but by a symbol. At that moment, the green-black seals on the summit hall doors flickered and died, their power source severed by the Fuinjutsu team. With a tremendous groan, the great steel doors were forced open from the outside. General Mifune of the Land of Iron stood there, his samurai army arrayed behind him, ready for war. He burst in to find a scene of quiet, breathtaking victory. The daimyo's elite guard, defeated and bound. The cage, alive and safe, and standing amidst the wreckage, bloody but unbowed, were the 50 queens of the New World, their king standing before them, having just shattered a throne and ended an age. The coup was over. The revolution had begun. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The King of the World. The world held its breath. The broadcast from the Land of Iron had been a political earthquake. A shockwave that shattered 1,000 years of tradition in a single, thunderous hour. In the streets of every village, in the courts of every minor nation, people gathered around projection screens, watching the grainy, replayed footage of the shattered chrysanthemum throne. They had witnessed the end of an age. In the immediate aftermath, chaos reigned. The daimyo's governments, their central authority decapitated and their conspiracy laid bare, crumbled. Armies without masters laid down their arms. Bureaucrats without lords looked to the shinobi alliance not with fear, but with a desperate plea for order. The power vacuum was absolute, and terrifying. Naruto did not return to Konoha as a hero. He returned as the sole pillar in a collapsing world. His first act was to confront the architect of the failed coup. Lord Tenjin, the fire daimyo, was not in chains. He was found in his private garden, calmly sipping tea as if awaiting an old friend. His guards were gone, his ministers had fled or been arrested. He was just an old man in a silk kimono, surrounded by the wreckage of his ambition. "You have come to kill me, I presume," Tenjin said, not looking up from his cup. His voice was tired, stripped of its aristocratic silkiness. "That would be the old way," Naruto replied, standing before him. He was not flanked by guards, only by Sakura and a stoic Chiyoko. A new king, executing the old one to solidify his power. "But I am not a king. And you are no longer a lord." Tenjin finally looked up, his eyes hollow. "Then what am I?" "A lesson," Naruto said, his voice devoid of malice. "You will be allowed a quiet retirement on a remote estate. You will have your gardens and your tea. You will live out your days in perfect, powerless peace. You will watch as we build the world you tried to burn." And you will understand that your age of thrones and shadows is over. That is a fate far worse than death for a man like you." The daimyo's teacup trembled, and he looked away, a broken man defeated not by force, but by the sheer, dismissive weight of his own irrelevance. With the old order swept from the board, the new one had to be forged. The Cage Summit reconvened, this time in the Uzumaki compound. They were joined by General Mifune of the Land of Iron and the leaders of a dozen smaller nations. They were not here to debate, but to ratify a foregone conclusion. It was Gaara, his voice steady as the desert rock, who made the formal proclamation. "The world is adrift. The old systems have failed. We have faced threats both mortal and divine, and we have survived. Because of the strength and will of one man. We can no longer afford the divisions of the past. We need a single leader, a unified command to guide us through the coming storm. Not a cage of one village, but a leader for the entire world." Quote. He looked directly at Naruto, and for the first time, Naruto saw not just a friend, but a subject offering his fealty. "On behalf of the unified nations of this continent, we ask that you accept the title of Hegemon, Supreme Commander of the Shinobi Alliance. Let the world be guided by your will." One by one, they stood. Darui of Kumo, Kuretsuchi of Iwa, Chojuro of Kiri, Mifune of Iron. They bowed their heads, not in submission, but in acknowledgement of a necessary truth. Naruto felt the weight of their collective hope, their fear, their future, settle upon his shoulders. It was a physical thing, heavier than any mountain. He wanted to refuse. The orange-clad boy inside him who just wanted a bowl of ramen and the respect of his village screamed in protest. But that boy was long gone. He looked past the cage, his gaze finding the 50 women who stood watching from the gallery. His wives, his council, his legion, they were the architects of this moment as much as he was. He saw the unwavering faith in Hinata's eyes, the fierce pride in Temari's, the grudging, absolute respect in Kuretsuchi's. They were not asking him to rule them. They were asking him to lead them. They were his partners, his equals, the 50 pillars that held him up. Their collective strength flowed into him, and in it, he found his own. He finally accepted the burden he was born for. He stepped forward, his expression solemn, his voice ringing with a power that was entirely his own. "I accept this burden," he declared to the leaders of the world. "Not as your ruler, but as your shield." His coronation was not a grand affair. There were no crowns, no thrones, no cheering crowds. It was a grim, quiet ceremony held at the base of the memorial stone, where the aims of the fallen from every nation now stood together. In accepting the title, he was making a vow to them, the silent, watching dead. A vow that their sacrifices would birth a world worthy of their memory. He stood before the world's leaders, clad in a simple, unadorned white haori bearing the Uzumaki swirl on its back, a symbol of his heritage and his new role as the center of their world. He was no longer Uzumaki Naruto, the knucklehead ninja. He was the Hegemon, the king of a world united. It was in this moment of profound, solemn unity, that the sky began to die. It started with the censors. Across the globe, in every hidden village, every member of the Yamanaka, Hyuga, and other sensory clans cried out and collapsed, clutching their heads in agony. Karen, standing with the other wives, fell to her knees. A thin trickle of blood running from her nose. "The natural energy," she gasped, her voice strained with pain. It's getting thin, cold." Naruto, in his perfect sage mode, felt it most keenly. The vibrant, life-giving energy of the planet was being leached away, like warmth being sucked into a vacuum. The world's very life force was growing faint. Then came the visual horror. A single star in the clear night sky winked out. Then another. Then a dozen more. A patch of the heavens, directly overhead, was wiped clean, replaced by a perfect, starless, and absolute blackness. It was a hole in the universe. From the center of that hole, a rift began to tear its way through the fabric of reality. It was a silent, terrifying wound, bleeding a colorless, shimmering aurora of pure nothingness. It was not an army that poured forth. It was an apocalypse. A slow, inexorable wave of erasure began to descend from the sky. It was beautiful and horrifying, a silent, graceful tide of unmaking. Where it touched the highest wisps of cloud, they did not scatter, they dissolved into nothing. The very air in the upper atmosphere it passed through ceased to exist, creating a vacuum that made the wind itself scream in protest. On the ground, a collective, primal scream of terror rose from every corner of the planet as billions of people looked up to see their sky being deleted. Shinobi launched jutsu at the descending wave, great fireballs and lances of lightning that flew into the colorless aurora and simply vanished, their energy consumed, their existence nullified. This was the power of Amatsu Mikabashi. Not to conquer, not to destroy, but to unmake. It was the coming of the Great Silence. In the face of Armageddon, the world looked to its new king. The Cage and the generals stared at the sky, their strongest techniques useless, their faces masks of despair. What could any army do against the end of reality itself? Naruto did not despair. He was no longer just a man. He was the world's shield. He looked at the descending wave of nothingness, then he turned and looked at his wives. All 50 of them were gathered, their faces pale but their eyes blazing with a defiant fire. They were terrified, but they were not broken. They looked to him, their trust absolute. "It has come for us," he said, his voice a calm anchor in the storm of fear. "It was drawn to the light we built together." A grim smile touched his lips. "Let's not keep it waiting." He led them, not in a retreat, but in an ascent. They moved to the highest point of the Uzumaki compound, the roof of the Great Council Hall. A place built by the hands of all their nations. They were 51 souls, the last line of defense against the void. "I need your strength," he said to them, his voice soft but clear over the rising wind. "All of it. Don't hold anything back. Link your chakra to mine. Become one with me." One by one, they reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder, his back, his arm. A great web of connection was woven in that moment. He felt the sharp, cutting gale of Temari's will, the molten, unyielding stubbornness of Kuretsuchi's earth, the explosive, crackling fire of Karui's spirit, the cold, patient certainty of Yugiri's ice, the vibrant, healing pulse of Sakura's love, the gentle, unwavering purity of Hinata's heart. 50 unique souls, 50 different chakra natures, a symphony of every element, every keke genkai, every bloodline the world had ever known. The great confluence the herald had spoken of. All of it flowed into him, not as a raging torrent, but as a willing chorus. For a moment, the sheer, overwhelming power threatened to tear him apart. He was a vessel containing the entire, multifaceted soul of his world. Then, with a roar that was both his and Kurama's, he mastered it. The golden chakra of the Six Paths Sage Mode erupted from him, but it was transformed. It became a blinding, brilliant, platinum-white light, a star of impossible intensity. And swirling within it, like a captive cosmos, were the colors of every chakra he had just absorbed. It was a living, breathing rainbow of power. It was not just his chakra. It was not just the sage's chakra. It was the unified life force of the world itself. It was world chakra. It radiated a palpable, defiant warmth that pushed back against the encroaching, soul-sapping cold of the void. The descending wave of nothingness was now touching the peaks of the highest mountains, erasing them from existence. And in the center of the great black rift in the sky, an eye opened. It was a swirling vortex of anti-reality. A black hole that was not just a physical phenomenon, but a conscious, malevolent intelligence. Amatsu Mikabashi was looking down upon them. Naruto stood in the center of his queens, blazing like a newborn star. Their own chakra cloaks ignited, each a different hue, all of them linked to the great, swirling power of the man at their center. They were a single, defiant constellation against the encroaching night. He looked up at the eye of the void, then he looked at the brave, beautiful, terrified, and determined faces of the women who stood with him. His family, his world. He gave them a fierce, confident grin. "All right," he said, his voice ringing with the power of the unified world at his back. "Let's show it what life can do." Chapter 10 End.